Welcome to Tech Explained. Today, we're exploring CISSP Domain 4, Communication and Network Security. If you pause for a moment and, look around, you'll realize our entire modern world, from the tiny smartwatch on your wrist to the massive industrial control systems managing our power grids, operates on networks. They are the invisible threads that weave through virtually everything we do, allowing unprecedented connection and efficiency.
And with that incredible interconnectedness comes an equally immense responsibility, securing it. Just imagine the sheer volume of data, the critical operations, the personal information flowing across these digital pathways every single second. Protecting that isn't just a technical challenge, it's really a foundational requirement for modern life. Our whole digital fabric relies on robust, secure communication.
Absolutely. The internet, for all its wonders, is also a vast, often unforgiving place. Our mission today is to equip you with the strategic insights and core knowledge needed to defend these vital networks. We'll guide you through the essential concepts and maybe some surprising realities that cybersecurity professionals navigate daily, protecting against threats, whether they're coming from the outside or, perhaps more cunningly, already lurking within. Think of this as your shortcut to understanding the why behind securing the digital highway.
Exactly. It's about building a fortress around your digital assets, yeah. But not just with a single thick wall. We're talking about a multi-layered, intelligent defense that anticipates challenges and adapts.
So if we're building a fortress, where do we begin? That takes us straight into secure design principles and network architectures. And at the very heart of that lies a powerful concept known as defense in depth, which, we often call layered security.
That's a perfect analogy, actually. Imagine protecting your most valuable possession, say a priceless piece of art. You wouldn't just put it behind one locked door, right, no matter how strong. You'd have a perimeter fence, perhaps a reinforced outer wall, a sturdy front door, then maybe an alarmed room, a secure display case, and finally the item itself. Defense in depth applies this exact philosophy to cybersecurity. The core insight here isn't just about piling on controls, but acknowledging that no single defense is foolproof. You're designing for the inevitable failure of a single layer, ensuring that if one control is bypassed, others are still in place to protect your valuable assets.
So it's about anticipating that a single tripwire might fail and having a whole series of them ready. And it's not just about preventing attacks, is it? It's also about detecting them, responding to them once they're in motion. So you need a combination of preventive controls to stop an attack from happening, detective controls to alert you if something is amiss, and corrective controls to fix the issue or minimize damage. All these types of controls need to be working together at every single layer.
Precisely. Let's make this really concrete with a common scenario. Instead of just putting a single firewall between your internal systems and the vast, unvetted internet, which, surprisingly, some organizations still consider enough, you'd add many more layers. For instance, you could begin with a fundamental network segmentation strategy.
Okay, so rather than one big open office, you're carving it up into smaller control departments.
Yeah.
And here's where it gets really smart. You take all your public-facing systems, like your web servers, your mail servers, anything that has to directly face the internet, and you move them into a specially dedicated network segment. This segment is known as a demilitarized zone, or DMZ. Then you add a second firewall, creating what's called a screened subnet architecture. And a truly surprising move, maybe for many organizations, is to ensure that the second firewall is from a completely different vendor than the first one.
Oh, that vendor diversity is a brilliant strategic move, yeah. Often overlooked by those just focused on individual product features. An attacker who finds a vulnerability in vendor A's firewall won't automatically be able to bypass vendor B's firewall using the same exploit. It forces them to work twice as hard, reducing the likelihood of a complete bypass. Beyond those preventive measures, you then layer in detective capabilities, such as an intrusion detection system, or IDS, which watches for suspicious activity and raises an alarm, or, for a more active defense, an intrusion prevention system, an IPS, which not only detects but can also block that suspicious traffic, actively preventing attacks from unfolding.
This all sounds incredibly robust, but also potentially very expensive. So what does this all mean for the bottom line? And what's a surprising mistake organizations often make when trying to balance that cost with the actual value of their assets?
Well, it means every control you implement, every piece of technology, must be cost-effective. The security measures need to be balanced against the actual business value of the assets you're protecting. A common mistake is either overspending on low-value assets or, conversely, underspending on critical ones. You wouldn't put a Fort Knox-level defense around a simple internal document server unless that document server holds, the blueprints to your company's secret sauce or your crown jewel, so to speak. The surprise is often realizing that the cost of not securing an asset can be exponentially higher than the upfront investment in defense. Data breaches aren't just about financial loss. They impact reputation, customer trust, and frankly, long-term viability.
That's a crucial point, the cost of inaction. Moving beyond defense in depth, let's talk more about network segmentation and partitioning. We touched on it, but let's clearly define why it's so vital. It's the concept of breaking your larger network into smaller, isolated pieces or segments. The goal is to precisely control the flow of traffic between these segments and apply different levels of security to each.
Right. Think of it like dividing a massive corporate campus into separate, secure buildings or even floors within a building. Some areas might have open door policies like a public reception area, while others like the R&D lab or the executive suite have much stricter access controls, maybe biometric scanners, things like that. In a network, one segment might be a loosely controlled guest Wi-Fi network that only allows internet access, while another segment contains your high-value back-end databases with extensive controls to prevent any unauthorized access. It's all about limiting the blast radius if a breach occurs.
And the largest form of segmentation is typically the network perimeter, right? The boundary between your internal network and the Wild West of the internet. You want a very clear, strictly controlled boundary, often enforced by a robust firewall.
Exactly. And here's a truly critical point, something that represents a fundamental shift in modern cybersecurity thinking. You should absolutely never think of your internal network as inherently trusted. Now, this might sound counterintuitive after all, it's your network, but the reality is adversaries are constantly trying to get inside and often succeed in some form. You must always operate under the assumption that the baddies are already within your network perimeter. This is the essence of the zero trust philosophy. No network segment, no user, no device is inherently trusted. You verify everything all the time, regardless of where the request originates.
The baddies are already inside mindset is a tough pill to swallow for many traditional security teams, I bet. What's the biggest practical challenge organizations face when trying to implement zero trust, especially when it comes to existing infrastructure?
The biggest challenge is often the sheer complexity and effort involved in re-architecting security for applications and data that were built on the old implicit trust model. It requires granular visibility into every user device and application, and then defining detailed access policies for every single interaction. It's a complete overhaul of an organization's security posture, not just installing some new software. It demands a culture shift too, because it changes how employees access resources day to day.
Fascinating. Now, we mentioned the DMZ or demilitarized zone earlier.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on its strategic purpose? Why set up this sort of no man's land?
A DMZ is a dedicated network segment specifically designed to house what we call bastion hosts. These are systems that are intentionally accessible by the public over the internet. Think your public web servers, your mail servers, maybe a public-facing FTP server. The key purpose of a DMZ is to contain attacks. We fully expect these publicly facing systems to be targeted, probed, and potentially even compromised. By isolating them within the DMZ, we prevent an attacker from immediately gaining a foothold directly into your more sensitive internal network. Traffic flow from the DMZ into the internal network is severely restricted, often to the point where it's essentially just connected out to the internet, acting as a buffer or, a sacrificial lamb.
So a bastion host is basically a server that's built like a digital tank, ready to take a beating.
Precisely. They are highly hardened systems, stripped down to only the essential services they need to operate, and meticulously configured to withstand attacks. They're your first line of defense for public-facing services, designed to absorb impact rather than pass it on.
Let's talk about proxy servers. We hear this term a lot, maybe even use them without realizing it. How does a proxy specifically contribute to network security?
Okay, so a proxy is essentially an intermediary server. It acts as a go-between, sitting between two devices or networks, and all traffic between them must pass through it. This position allows the proxy to inspect, filter, control, and even hide the devices behind it. Think of it as a very intelligent traffic cop and a bouncer all rolled into one, inspecting every interaction.
And there are different kinds, which implies different security benefits, right? What are the main flavors?
Yes, exactly. You have forward proxies, which typically act on behalf of clients trying to access external resources. From a security perspective, they can enhance privacy by hiding the client's actual IP address, making it harder to track them directly. They can also filter outgoing content, blocking access to malicious websites, or enforcing acceptable use policies. Then there are reverse proxies, which sit in front of servers. Their primary role is often to distribute incoming traffic to multiple backend servers, that's load balancing, but they significantly enhance security by hiding the details of those backend servers from direct public view. If an attacker can't see the specific server, they can't directly target it. You might also encounter a transparent proxy, which intercepts traffic without requiring any client-side configuration. Users don't even know it's there, making it useful for monitoring or filtering all network traffic without user intervention. And finally, a non-transparent proxy, which does require explicit client configuration and can modify the traffic it handles. This type is often used for specific security functions like content filtering or malware scanning, where more active intervention is needed.
Speaking of hiding IP addresses, that brings us to network address translation, NET-T, and port address translation, PAT. What's the core idea here, and why are they so fundamental to how the internet works today, especially for IPv4?
NAT, or Network Address Translation, is a method of remapping IP addresses. When a packet leaves your internal network for the internet, NAT changes its internal private IP address, which isn't routable on the public internet, to a public routable IP address. And crucially, it does the reverse for returning packets, changing the public destination IP back to the internal system's private IP. This allows multiple devices on a private network to share a single public IP address. The why it matters here is massive. It conserves precious public IPv4 addresses, which we effectively ran out of years ago, and adds a layer of privacy by hiding your internal network structure.
So it's kind of like a corporate post office box for your internal network where everyone in the office shares the same public mailing address, but the mail eventually gets routed to the right internal recipient, and PAT then is an extension of that.
That's a great analogy, yeah. And yes, port address translation is an ingenious extension of NAT. Instead of just remapping IP addresses, PAT also reaps port numbers. This allows multiple internal devices to share a single public IP address simultaneously by assigning each device a unique port number for its outgoing connections. It's incredibly efficient for allowing hundreds or thousands of internal users to access the internet through just one or a few public IP addresses. Honestly, without PAT, the internet as we know it would likely have ground to a halt years ago due to IPv4 address exhaustion.
Now let's talk about the unsung heroes of network security, firewalls. What's their fundamental job, and how have they evolved to become so sophisticated?
Well, at their most basic, firewalls are the network gatekeepers. Their fundamental job is to control the flow of traffic between different network segments. They decide what traffic, say, from the internet is allowed into your internal network and vice versa, based on a set of predefined rules. They've definitely gotten much smarter over the years.
So they're the bouncers for your network. What are the different types, and what's the trade-off in terms of speed versus intelligence?
Okay, we start with packet filtering firewalls. These are the simplest, operating at layer 3, the network layer of the OSI model. They inspect only the packet headers, looking at source and destination IP addresses and ports against a predefined access control list, or ACL. They're not very intelligent in terms of understanding what the data is, but they're incredibly efficient, making decisions very quickly with low latency. They're your basic allow or deny based on address bouncer.
So they just glance at the address and port, make a quick decision, and move on. Does that mean a really sophisticated attacker could easily slip something malicious through if it just looks like a legitimate address?
That's precisely the Achilles heel of simple packet filters. They don't understand the context of a conversation. That's where stateful packet filtering firewalls come in. These are smarter. They still primarily look at headers, but they maintain a state table, a memory of recent traffic and established connections. If a connection is initiated from inside your network and a reply comes back, the firewall remembers the outgoing packet and allows the reply. But an unsolicited incoming packet from an unknown connection would be blocked. They also operate at layer 3, but their memory makes them far more secure by understanding conversation flows.
Right, so they're not just looking at individual packets in isolation, they're remembering the context of a conversation. That's a huge step up.
It is, yeah. Moving higher up the stack, we find circuit proxy firewalls. These operate at layer 5, the session layer. They understand the session context and allow or deny entire communication sessions based on predefined rules. They act as an intermediary, establishing a separate connection on behalf of the client to the destination. This offers a stronger separation between the internal and external networks.
And at the top of the pyramid of intelligence, we have application firewalls. These sound like they're really getting into the weeds of the actual content being sent.
They are the most intelligent, operating at layer 7, the application layer. Application firewalls perform what's called deep packet inspection. This means they don't just look at headers. They can reassemble a series of packets to inspect the actual data content being sent. For example, they can scan files for viruses, look for specific application commands, or enforce policies unique to an application, like only allowing certain types of HTTP requests. This offers highly sophisticated decision-making, allowing you to block specific web attacks, but that intelligence comes at a cost. Higher latency. They are the slowest type of firewall because of the extensive processing required.
So it's a constant trade-off between lightning speed and deep intelligence. But I imagine modern firewalls try to give you the best of both worlds now.
Precisely. Most modern firewalls, often called next-generation firewalls or NGFWs, are hybrid devices, combining the capabilities of all these types. They can make quick, simple decisions based on packet headers when speed is critical, but they can also apply thorough, deep packet inspection for more complex security challenges when necessary. This gives you the benefits of both speed and sophisticated intelligence where you need it most.
Okay, so firewalls are gatekeepers, deciding who gets in and out. But what about the threats that somehow slip past, or maybe the internal bad actors already lurking? That's where a network's eyes and ears come in. Intrusion detection systems, IDS, and intrusion prevention systems, IPS. What's the key difference in how they react?
Right, so an IDS, or intrusion detection system, inspects network traffic to detect suspicious activity and then raises an alarm or alert. It's like a silent alarm system in your house. It tells you if someone broke in, but it doesn't stop them. An IPS, or intrusion prevention system, does everything an IDS does, detects suspicious activity, but then it takes an important step further. If it detects something suspicious, it actively blocks that traffic, preventing the attack from reaching its target. An IPS acts like a security guard who not only spots a suspicious person, but physically stops them from entering.
So one alerts, the other blocks.
Got it. And where do you typically deploy these on a network? Are they tied to specific devices or do they watch entire segments?
Both are possible. A host-based IDS or IPS is installed directly on a specific host, often a high-value server like a database or web server. It monitors only the activity on that particular host. If you want to monitor 100 servers, you'd need 100 host-based agents. It's very granular, focused on that single system.
That makes sense for critical individual systems. And a network-based system, how does that differ? A network-based IDS, or IPS, is connected to a network segment and monitors all the traffic flowing within that entire segment. This gives it a broader view, allowing it to see activity across multiple systems, maybe looking for patterns that wouldn't be obvious on a single host.
Okay, how do you connect a network-based IDS or IPS to the network without creating a bottleneck or a single point of failure? I imagine there are different methods depending on what you want to achieve, right?
There are, definitely. One method is inline, where all traffic entering or leaving a network segment must pass directly through the IDS or IPS. This is very common for IPS systems because it allows them to easily block malicious traffic since they are directly in the data path. However, the downside, as you mentioned, is that it creates a single point of failure. If the inline device goes down, network traffic could stop.
Which would basically be a denial of service for the network itself. So what's the other method, perhaps better suited for just monitoring, just watching?
The other method is connecting the IDS or IPS to a switch using what's often called a mirror port, span port, or promiscuous port. Normally, a switch only sends traffic to the intended destination port, but with a mirror port, all packets flowing through the switch are copied and sent to the IDS or IPS, allowing it to monitor everything without being directly in the traffic path. This is a clever way to ensure visibility without introducing a bottleneck or single point of failure. This method is more common for IDSs as they are primarily for detection and don't need to be inline to block traffic.
That's smart, allowing observation without disruption. How do these systems actually detect threats? Do they look for specific known patterns, or do they try to figure out what's normal and then flag anything abnormal? What are the detection methods?
They use both fundamental approaches, really. Pattern matching, also known as signature analysis, involves programming the IDS to look for specific patterns or fingerprints of known attacks. Think of it like a viral signature for malware. It's fast and efficient, but its limitation is that it can only detect what it has been explicitly told to look for. It's excellent for known threats.
So if there's a brand new unknown attack, what we call a zero-day exploit signature analysis won't catch it right.
Exactly. That's where anomaly-based detection comes in. Instead of looking for specific bad patterns, this method learns what normal network behavior looks like. It establishes a baseline over time. Then it flags any deviations from that normal behavior as anomalous or suspicious. This is powerful for detecting novel or mutated attacks that don't match any known signatures.
And how does it detect those anomalies? What kind of normal does it learn? Are there different types of anomaly detection?
Yeah, there are several ways. Stateful matching detects anomalies within the context of a continuous traffic stream. For example, it can spot if a system starts sending TCP packets to another system without first establishing a proper session, which would be abnormal and indicative of a scan or attack. Statistical anomaly detection compares current traffic to typical or predicted traffic profiles, looking for statistically significant deviations, like a sudden massive increase in outbound data, which could signal data exfiltration. Protocol anomaly detection focuses on whether network protocols are being used correctly or if unaligned protocols are present. For example, if only SFTP traffic is allowed on a certain port and suddenly unencrypted FTP appears. And traffic anomaly detection identifies unusual patterns or behaviors in the overall flow of network traffic within a session, perhaps recognizing an unusual number of failed login attempts or unexpected connection durations.
So it's constantly looking for anything that just doesn't look right, based on historical data or expected protocol behavior. Very intelligent. What about whitelists and blacklists? Are those relevant here, or are they more for firewalls?
Oh, they're absolutely relevant for IDSs and IPSs too. An allow list or whitelist is a list of specific IP addresses or entities that are explicitly permitted to connect, blocking all others. This is a very restrictive but highly secure approach, often used for critical systems where you know exactly who should be connecting. Conversely, a deny list or blacklist specifies IP addresses or entities that are explicitly blocked, allowing all others. These lists provide a quick way for the system to make a binary decision about traffic, often used for known malicious IPs or hostile networks.
And finally, a truly fascinating detection method that sounds almost like a scientific experiment. The sandbox. How does that work in this context?
A sandbox provides a safe, isolated environment where untrusted code, like an executable file attached to an email, can be run and observed. Think of it as a secure, walled-off playpen where you can let potentially dangerous software run wild and see what it tries to do without ever letting it touch your actual production systems. An IDS or IPS could detect an executable being transmitted, make a copy, run it in the sandbox, and see if it exhibits malicious behavior like attempting to install ransomware or communicate with external command and control servers. If it does, the system can then alert and potentially block the file from reaching the intended victim system. It's a powerful way to catch entirely new, unknown threats because it analyzes behavior, not just signatures.
That's a fantastic way to catch threats that no one has seen before. Another tool for detecting attackers, and arguably one of the most intriguing, is the use of honeypots and honeynets. What exactly are these digital traps?
Right. A honeypot is essentially a decoy system. It's designed to resemble a real production system, like a file server, a database, or even an industrial control system. However, it's not actually a system meant for legitimate use by employees or clients. It's carefully monitored, intentionally made vulnerable in some ways, and has no actual production data. If someone tries to connect to or interact with the honeypot, it's a very strong indicator that you have a threat actor actively exploring your network, looking for systems to compromise. It's essentially bait.
So it's a trap designed to attract and then observe attackers. And a honeynet, is that just a bunch of honeypots?
Exactly. A honeynet is an entire network composed of multiple honeypots, perhaps configured to look like different departments or types of servers within an organization, making the decoy environment much more realistic and engaging for attackers. Both honeypots and honeynets are particularly effective at detecting advanced persistent threats, APTs, which are sophisticated long-term attacks designed to remain undetected. By observing how attackers interact with these decoys, security teams can gather invaluable intelligence on their tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs, without risking actual production systems. It's like having a dedicated lab to study the behavior of digital intruders.
Okay, if we're monitoring traffic, should we just be watching what's coming in or what's going out too? That brings us to ingress versus egress monitoring. Why is it often said that egress monitoring can be even more crucial than ingress?
Well, both are critical, obviously, but you're right. Egress monitoring, watching traffic leaving your network is often overlooked, but equally, if not more, important for detecting breaches. Ingress monitoring focuses on traffic entering your network, typically from external sources like the internet. You're looking for malicious connections or attacks coming in. However, if malware has infected a company system or an insider is trying to steal data, it often tries to call home to external command and control servers or exfiltrate data. Detecting traffic flowing out to known bad IP addresses or unusual volumes of data leaving your network is often the first and most critical sign that an attacker has gained a foothold and is actively operating. It's essentially an ET phone home moment for malware. It's arguably harder to prevent every initial intrusion than it is to detect the indicators of compromise that inevitably follow once they're inside.
That makes perfect sense. No matter how many layers of network defense you have, if the actual devices connected to the network aren't secure, the whole thing falls apart. So endpoint security is undeniably crucial, isn't it?
Absolutely. You simply cannot have a truly secure network if the individual endpoints, your laptops, mobile phones, IoT devices, smart security cameras, servers, you name it, are not secure themselves. As we've emphasized in other discussions, it's critical to harden these devices through correct configuration, ensuring they are patched regularly, and enforcing strong authentication mechanisms. Security needs to be distributed. It's not just about guarding the network perimeter, but every single device connected to it, because each one can be a potential entry point or pivot point for an attacker.
Yeah, to truly understand network security, you need to grasp the fundamental models that underpin all networking. We're talking about the OSI model and the TCP/IP model. Let's start with the OSI model. What exactly is it, and why do we still talk about this conceptual framework? It feels a bit academic sometimes.
Yeah, the OSI model, or Open Systems Interconnection model, is a conceptual 7-layer framework developed by the ISO. It's not a strict set of rules that hardware follows exactly, but rather a guide for standardizing how systems should communicate. It helps us understand the different logical functions involved in network communication, from the raw physical transmission of bits all the way up to how applications interact with the network. It's an intellectual blueprint that helps diagnose problems and understand where different networking components and security controls fit. It gives us a common language.
And then there's the TCP/IP model, which I hear is more functional and closer to what actually runs the internet, right? A bit more practical.
Yes, the TCP/IP model, sometimes called the DARPA or DoD model, is a 4-layer functional model that maps more directly to the protocols actually used on the internet today, like TCP, IP, UDP, etc. While OSI is a great conceptual ideal for understanding the different functions, TCP/IP is the practical reality of how modern networks operate.
All right, let's break down the OSI layers from the bottom up. I've always found a mnemonic helpful for remembering them. Please do not throw sausage pizza away. So let's start at the very bottom with layer 1. Physical. What happens there? What's the gist?
Okay, imagine layer 1 as the literal plumbing or the airwaves of your network. It's where the raw data, just bits and bytes, ones and zeros, gets shoved down the pipes, whether that's electricity through a copper wire, light pulses through a fiber optic cable, or invisible radio waves floating through the air. It's all about the physical transmission of data. The voltage levels, the light pulses, the radio frequencies, it's the physics of it all.
So the actual wires and airwaves, what kind of physical media are we talking about here? The common stuff we see.
Right. For wired connections, we have twisted pair cables like Cat5, Cat6, Cat7, or Cat8 Ethernet cables, commonly terminated with an RJ45 jack. That's probably what you plug into your laptop. Then there's coaxial cable, often used for cable modems or older network setups, and fiber optic cable, which uses light for super fast, long-distance transmission, and crucially, it's immune to electromagnetic interference. For wireless, it's primarily radio frequency, which includes Wi-Fi, but also things like infrared and microwave links, often used for line-of-sight connections between buildings or for satellite communication.
And the topologies at this layer, how are devices physically connected? And what does that mean for how signals travel and maybe collide?
We have several basic layouts. The bus topology, where all devices share a single cable, is simple but prone to collisions, as multiple devices might try to transmit simultaneously. Think of everyone shouting on one phone line. A tree topology segments the bus, helping reduce collisions by isolating traffic somewhat. The star topology, where all devices connect to a central device like a switch, is very common today and manages collisions much more effectively by directing traffic only where it needs to go. A mesh topology, where devices are interconnected with redundant paths, offers high availability. If one path fails, another can be used. A full mesh is rare due to cabling complexity, but partial mesh for critical devices is common. And finally, the ring topology, often seen in holder token passing networks like Token Ring, avoids collisions by allowing only one device to transmit at a time in a circular fashion.
So collisions are a big problem, especially in those older bus topologies. How do we deal with them in modern networks? How do we avoid or detect them?
Good question. We use methods like CSMASI, carrier sense multiple access with collision avoidance, primarily used in wireless networks like Wi-Fi. Devices listen first to see if the channel is clear before transmitting, trying to avoid collisions. For wired Ethernet networks, there's CSMADI, carrier sense multiple access with collision detection. Devices listen while transmitting, and if they detect a collision has occurred, signals interfering, they both stop, wait a random amount of time, and then try retransmitting.
What are the key devices that operate purely at this layer 1, the really simple ones?
Devices like hubs, repeaters, and concentrators operate purely at layer 1. They have essentially zero intelligence. Their sole purpose is to receive an electrical signal or radio wave and immediately retransmit or repeat it to all connected devices or ports. They are fast because they don't think, they just amplify signals without any decision-making, broadcasting everything to everyone connected. The main standard to associate with Layer 1 for wireless is the 802.11 family for wireless LANs covering the physical specs.
All right, moving up to layer 2, data link. What's the main function here, and how does it introduce structure to the raw bits flying around at layer 1?
Layer 2, the data link layer, is where the raw bits from Layer 1 are organized into structured units called frames for transmission across a single network segment or link. It's responsible for physical addressing and establishing reliable point-to-point connections on that local link. Think of it as putting the digital raw materials into nicely labeled boxes for local delivery within the same building or floor.
And the crucial addressing method at this layer is the MASI address, right? That unique hardware address.
Yes, the Media Access Control Address. It's a unique 48-bit identifier permanently assigned to every network interface controller, or NIC, typically burned into the hardware by the manufacturer. The first 24 bits of a MASI address identify the manufacturer. That's the Organizationally Unique Identifier, or OUI, and the last 24 bits are unique to that specific interface. Switches use these MASI addresses to direct traffic only to the correct device on a local network segment, ensuring efficiency and avoiding unnecessary broadcasts.
So, switches operate primarily at layer 2. Are there other devices or key protocols here that are fundamental?
Beyond switches, you'll find bridges, which connect two physical network segments, making forwarding decisions based on MAC addresses, kind of like an early, simpler switch. As for protocols, ARP, Address Resolution Protocol, is absolutely vital here. It translates a Layer 3 IP address into Layer 2 MAC address, allowing devices to find each other on a local network. Without ARP, your computer wouldn't know the MC address of the router to send traffic outside the local network. Its inverse, RARP, reverse ARP, translates MC to IP, though it's less common now. We also have 802.1x for port-based network access control, which we'll talk more about, and authentication protocols like PPP, point-to-point protocol, and the insecure password authentication protocol, the better THP, challenge handshake authentication protocol, and the framework EAP, extensible authentication protocol. Layer 2 tunneling protocols like PPTP and L2TP are also relevant here, often used for VPNs.
Now layer 3, network. This is where IP addresses live, and it sounds like the layer that gets data across different networks, across vast distances.
Correct. Layer 3, the network layer, is responsible for logical addressing, routing packets across different networks, and ensuring their delivery from the original source to the final destination, potentially crossing many different types of Layer 2 networks along the way. It's the layer that understands how to get data from your network in London to a server network in Tokyo, even if they're geographically distant, regardless of the underlying Layer 2 technology used in between. This is where your internet journey truly happens.
And the main address at this layer is the IP address. That's the global address.
Yes. An IP address is like a postal address. It identifies a specific system for routing across vast interconnected networks. Without an IP address, your data wouldn't know where to go on the vast internet. It's what allows data packets, or datagrams, as they're sometimes called at this layer, to travel from your computer to a server across the globe.
And the devices that make these routing decisions literally navigating the internet.
At Layer 3, you'll find routers, which are the core devices responsible for forwarding packets between different network segments and across the internet, based on their destination IP addresses and routing tables. And packet filtering firewalls also operate here, making quick allow-to-nay decisions based on IP and port information in the packet headers. Protocols include the foundational IPv4 and IPv6, which we'll delve into more, and essential routing protocols like OSPF, EIGRP, and BGP that routers use to exchange information and build the maps that guide traffic across the internet. Also, ICMP, which powers diagnostic tools like Ping and Traceroute, and NAT live here conceptually.
Okay, up to layer 4. Transport. This is about end-to-end connections, making sure data gets there reliably and in the right order, and often where ports come into play, right? Managing the conversation itself.
Exactly. Layer 4, the transport layer, manages end-to-end connections between applications on the source and destination hosts. It provides error correction and detection to ensure data integrity. It segments data from the upper layers, like your web request, into smaller units for transmission and reassembles them in the correct order at the destination. This is also the layer where ports come into play. Ports are numerical addresses, 065535, that map to specific services or applications running on a system.
Ports are like specialized doors to services on a system. How many are there, and what are some common ones that are important for security pros to know?
Right, there are 65,535 total ports available per IP address. Ports 0 through 5023 are considered well-known or common services, typically used by system-level applications and require administrator privileges to bind to. For example, port 80 for basic HTTP web traffic, port 443 for HTTPS, secure web traffic, port 22 for SSH, secure remote access, port 25 for SMTP, sending email, port 53 for DNS, domain name lookups, port 110 for POP3, receiving email, port 143 for IMAP, also receiving email. Knowing these isn't just trivia, it's vital for configuring firewalls, understanding network traffic, and identifying potentially open, vulnerable services on your network.
And the main protocols here, TCP and UDP, offer very different kinds of service, don't they? It's not one size fits all.
Yes, they're fundamentally different and serve distinct purposes. TCP, Transmission Control Protocol, is connection-oriented, meaning it establishes a formal connection before sending data. It provides reliable, ordered, and error-checked delivery. It's used when you need to be absolutely sure all data arrives, in sequence and without errors, like downloading a file or loading a web page. It uses a three-way handshake, SYN, SORN, ACK, to establish a connection and has various flags like URG, ACK, PSH, RST, SYN, FIN for managing the connection state. UDP, User Datagram Protocol, on the other hand, is connectionless, fast, and provides best effort delivery without guarantees of order or reliability. It just sends the data and hopes for the best. It's used for applications where speed is more critical than perfect reliability, like streaming video or voice calls, VoIP, or DNS lookups, where a lost packet is preferable to a delay caused by retransmissions. You also find TLS, Transport Layer Security, which often runs over TCP, and BGP, Border Gateway Protocol, the internet's routing protocol here, although BGP itself uses TCP for reliable updates.
Moving up to Layer 5 session. This layer deals with setting up and managing communication sessions, right?
Yeah.
Keeping the conversation organized.
That's right. The session layer is responsible for establishing, maintaining, and terminating communication sessions between two computers. It manages the dialogue control. It manages whether communication is simplex, one way, like a radio broadcast, half duplex, both can send receive, but not simultaneously, like a walkie-talkie, or full duplex, both can send receive simultaneously, like a phone call. A circuit proxy firewall operates at this layer, validating sessions. Protocols often associated with Layer 5 include NetBIOS and RPC, Remote Procedure Call.
Layer 6, presentation. This sounds like it's all about formatting and making data universally readable, like a translator.
That's precisely it. The presentation layer handles data transformation, ensuring data sent from the application layer of one system can be understood by the application layer of another system, regardless of their native data representation or encoding. This includes tasks like character code conversion, examply translating between ASCII and EBCDIC, data compression to reduce bandwidth usage, data encryption and decryption for security, and image format conversion, like JPEG, GIF, PNG. Think of common formats like JPEG, ASCII, or MIDI. It's about how the data is presented to the application layer in a usable format.
And finally, we reach the top, Layer 7, application. The very top layer, where users and applications actually interact with the network. This is what we see, right?
Yes, Layer 7, the application layer, is where human-computer interaction occurs and applications access network services. This is where you find the most intelligence and decision-making regarding the content of the communication, and it's the layer closest to the end user. Application firewalls operate at this layer, performing deep packet inspection to understand the application context and make very advanced allowed-nia decisions based on application-specific rules, though this deep inspection comes at the cost of higher latency. Protocols here are those you interact with daily: HTTPS for web browsing, DNS for name resolution, DHCP for IP address assignment, FTP for file transfer, Telnet and SSH for remote access, SMTP for sending email, POP3 and IMAP for receiving email, NTP for time synchronization, SNMP for network management, TLSSL for securing application data, SEP for VoIP initiation, SMIE for secure email, and LDAT for directory services.
That's a great overview of the OSI model, layer by layer. Now let's talk specifically about Internet Protocol, IP version 4 and 6, IPv6. You mentioned IP is the foundation at layer 3, but it's connectionless. What does that imply for building secure communications on top of it?
Right. IP is indeed a connectionless protocol. It sends packets or datagrams without first establishing a dedicated connection or guaranteeing delivery. It's like mailing a letter. You put an address on it, send it, and you hope it gets there. But there's no inherent acknowledgement of receipt built into IP itself. This makes it incredibly efficient and scalable, forming the foundation for data communication across the internet. But it means other protocols like TCP at layer 4 or specific security protocols like IPsec need to add the reliability, sequencing, error checking, and security features on top of IP. IP itself doesn't provide those guarantees.
IPv4 has been dominant for decades, but it has some serious limitations, primarily around address space, right? We've basically run out.
Yes, exactly. IPv4 uses 32-bit addresses, which yields approximately 4.3 billion unique addresses. While that sounded like an astronomical number back in the 70s and 80s, with billions of people and countless internet-connected devices today, we've essentially exhausted the pool of available public IPv4 addresses. Crucially, IPv4 also had no built-in security features by default. Any security, like encryption or authentication, had to be added on as an afterthought using separate protocols layered on top.
So IPv6 addresses these issues with a massive expansion and built-in security. That sounds like a major upgrade.
Absolutely. IPv6 is a fundamental modernization. It uses 128-bit addresses, which offers an astronomical 340 undecillion possible addresses. That's 340, followed by 36 zeros. We shouldn't run out anytime soon, even with the explosion of IoT devices. A major advantage for security is that capabilities for encryption and integrity checking are built right into the protocol suite, conceptually known as IPsec, which is a mandatory part of the IPv6 standard, unlike IPv4, where IPsec was an optional add-on. This makes secure communication potentially much easier and more ubiquitous with IPv6.
How do IP addresses actually work? How do you define a network versus a specific device on that network using the address?
Okay, an IP address is logically divided into two parts. A network part that identifies the specific network segment to which a device belongs, and a host part that identifies the unique device on that particular segment. This division is defined by a subnet mask in IPv4, or a prefix length, often shown using CIDR notation like 24 and 192.168.1.024. The 24 indicates that the first 24 bits represent the network, and the remaining 8 bits in IPv4's 32-bit address are available for identifying individual hosts on that network. This hierarchical structure allows routers to efficiently forward traffic just to the correct network, and then the local devices, like switches within that network, can find the specific host using layer 2 addresses.
And the old IPv4 network classes A, B, and C, are they still relevant or more just historical context now?
They're largely historical now, but understanding them provides useful context for how IP addressing evolved. These classes broadly categorize networks by their potential size or address capacities based on the first few bits of the address. Class A networks, first bit 0, could have over 16 million host addresses each. Class B, first bits 10, over 65,000, and Class C, first bits 110, provided 254 usable host addresses per network. These rigid class distinctions are less relevant today thanks to modern CIDR, classless interdomain routing, which allows for much more flexible and efficient allocation of IP address blocks using variable prefix lengths notation, regardless of the old class boundaries.
And there are specific private IPv4 addresses that are non-routable on the internet. What's their purpose? Why have these internal-only addresses?
Correct. These are reserved ranges specifically designated for use within private networks like your home network or a corporate LAN, and they are never routed on the public internet. Internet routers are configured to drop packets destined for these addresses. The 3 main private ranges are 10.0.08, a huge range, 172.16.0.012, 16 contiguous Class B size networks, and 192.168.0.016, 256 contiguous Class C size networks. This is precisely why NAT, network address translation, is so essential. It allows devices using these private non-routable addresses to communicate with the public internet by translating their private source IP to a public routable IP address at the network edge. This conserves public IPs and provides a built-in layer of privacy as your internal network's specific structure isn't directly visible or reachable from the outside.
So if IPv4 lacked built-in security, how did we add it? You mentioned IPsec earlier, especially in relation to IPv6, but it's used with IPv4 too, right?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. IPsec, or Internet Protocol Security, is a framework or suite of protocols defined by the IETF that provides robust data authentication, integrity, and confidentiality through encryption for IP communications. It's a foundational element for secure communications over IP networks, and it's widely used for implementing virtual private networks, VPNs, for both IPv4 and IPv6. It provides not just encryption to hide the data, but also access control, non-repudiation, proof of origin so the sender can't deny sending it, and message authentication using cryptographic hashes to ensure data hasn't been tampered with in transit.
And what are the different ways IP communication can occur? It's not just a simple one-to-one conversation, is it? There are different traffic patterns.
Exactly. There are several communication methods. Unicast is the most common, one-to-one communication from a single sender to a single receiver. This is how most of your web browsing, email, and file transfers work. Broadcast is one-to-all, where data is sent from one sender to all possible receivers within a specific network segment, like a LAN. This is often used for discovery services, like finding a DHCP server. Broadcasts don't typically cross routers. Multicast is one-to-many, where data is transmitted efficiently from one sender to multiple specific receivers that have explicitly joined a multicast group. This is ideal for things like distributing stock quotes, video conferencing, or streaming live events where many users need the same data simultaneously without sending individual copies to each. An Anycast is one to nearest or one to best. Multiple servers might share the same Anycast IP address, and routers direct a client's request to the server that is topologically closest or considered the best based on routing metrics. This is very useful for services like DNS root servers or content distribution networks, CDNs, directing users to the closest available server for faster response times and load distribution.
That's a great breakdown of IP itself. Now let's shift our focus specifically to secure protocols for communication beyond just the basic IP layer to really lock down network traffic and authenticate users. What's a key protocol for network authentication within a local environment, maybe in a Windows world?
One key protocol, especially prominent in Microsoft Active Directory environments, but also a standard, is Kerberos. It's a network authentication protocol designed to provide strong authentication for client-server applications by using secret key cryptography. It's widely used for single sign-on, SSO, and authorization within local area networks, LANs. It provides robust authentication, authorization, and even accounting AAA features. Critically, it prevents credentials like passwords from being sent in clear text across the network using a system of tickets granted by a trusted third party, the Key Distribution Center, or KDC.
Then there's the big one for securing web traffic, SSL/TLS. It seems practically every website uses HTTPS now, which relies on these protocols. What's the story there?
Indeed. SSL, or Secure Sockets Layer, was the original protocol developed by Netscape. However, over the years, significant vulnerabilities were discovered in various SSL versions, so it's now considered legacy and insecure. It should not be used. It has been largely supplanted by its successor, TLS, or Transport Layer Security, which is the modern IETF standard protocol. We're currently recommending versions TLS 1.2 and TLS 1.3. Their purpose is fundamental: providing data protection for web transactions, like online banking, e-commerce, or even just browsing securely. That's the SNHTTPS. They provide confidentiality through encryption, integrity to prevent tampering using message authentication codes, and authentication primarily of the server using digital certificates to ensure you're actually talking to the legitimate website and not an imposter.
How does that encryption work? You mentioned certificates, but how does the actual secure channel get set up? It always seemed like magic.
It's actually a clever blend of cryptography called hybrid cryptography. TLS employs this mechanism during the handshake phase. It uses asymmetric cryptography, public key crypto, which is computationally expensive, primarily for authentication, verifying the server's certificate, and to securely exchange a temporary symmetric session key. Once that shared symmetric key is established between the client and server, the bulk of the actual data exchanged during the session is then encrypted using that symmetric key, like AES, which is much, much faster and more efficient for encrypting large amounts of data. This process ensures both secure key exchange and efficient confidential data transfer. It's the best of both worlds, really.
And the TLS handshake is the critical dance that makes it all happen. What are the basic steps?
It is a critical multi-step sequence that negotiates the parameters and establishes the secure channel. It starts with the client sending a client hello message stating the TLS versions it supports, the cryptographic algorithms, cipher suites it prefers, and some random data. The server then responds with a server hello message, choosing the TLS version and cipher suite, sending its digital certificate, which contains its public key, and its own random data. The client verifies the server's certificate, checking its validity, signature, and trust chain. If valid, the client generates a symmetric session key, often called a pre-master secret, encrypts it using the server's public key, obtained from the certificate, and sends this encrypted key back to the server in a client key exchange message. The server uses its private key to decrypt the session key. At this point, both client and server independently calculate the same symmetric session keys from the exchanged data. They then exchange finished messages encrypted with the new session key to confirm the handshake was successful. Now, the secure channel is established, and application data like HTTP request responses can be sent encrypted with the symmetric session key.
And can both sides authenticate each other for even stronger security? Is that common?
Yes, for stronger security scenarios, mutual authentication can occur. In addition to the server providing its certificate to the client, the server can request that the client also send its digital certificate during the handshake. The server then verifies the client's certificate. This is common in enterprise environments or for highly sensitive applications like business-to-business transactions or internal services, where both parties need to strongly confirm the identity of the other before proceeding. It requires clients to have and manage their own certificates, which adds complexity.
Okay, beyond web traffic, what about secure file transfers and remote administration? These are core tasks for IT professionals, and doing them insecurely seems like a huge risk.
Absolutely. For file transfers, the old standard FTP file transfer protocol is incredibly common but transmits both credentials and data in clear text, making it a massive security risk. That's why we strongly recommend using Secure File Transfer Protocol, SFTP, which is essentially FTP tunneled over an encrypted SSH session, securing both authentication and data transfer. For remote management of servers, routers, switches, and other devices, Secure Shell SSH is the absolute go-to protocol. It allows IT administrators to remotely log in and execute commands securely with all communications encrypted over TCP/IP. It ensures confidentiality and integrity of commands and data, protecting against eavesdropping and hijacking. It's the secure replacement for older clear text protocols like Telnet, which should never be used over untrusted networks.
Back to IPsec, you mentioned it's a suite of protocols providing encryption and authentication at the IP layer. How does it provide these layers of security? What are its different operational modes? You mentioned tunnel and transport.
Right. IPsec is an IETF standardized suite, really a framework for securely connecting nodes at the IP layer, and it's fundamental for many VPN implementations. It provides confidentiality, encryption, integrity, preventing tampering, authentication, verifying identity, and anti-replay protection. It has two main operational modes. Transport mode, which encrypts only the packet payload, the actual data, like ECP segment, leaving the original IP header intact and readable. This is typically used for securing communications directly between two endpoints, peer-to-peer, on the same network, or when NAT traversal isn't a major issue. Tunnel mode, on the other hand, encrypts the entire original IP packet, including the original IP header, and then encapsulates it within a new IP packet with a new IP header. This mode effectively hides the internal network topology and is primarily used for gateway-to-gateway communications, such as connecting two entire office networks securely over the internet via VPN gateways, or for remote access VPNs where the client tunnels all traffic back to the corporate gateway.
And its core protocols within the suite, what actually provides the security services, AH and ESP?
Exactly. IPsec utilizes two main security protocols to provide its services. Authentication header, AH, provides strong authentication of the data's origin, data integrity, ensuring it hasn't been modified, and protection against replay attacks. However, importantly, AH provides no confidentiality. It doesn't encrypt the data payload. Its primary focus is proving authenticity and integrity. Then there's encapsulating security payload, ESP, which is generally more common because it does provide confidentiality through encryption. ESP also provides data integrity, authentication, though arguably weaker than AH's, and anti-replay protection. You can technically use AH and ESP together, but often ESP alone, with its authentication option enabled, is sufficient and preferred because it includes encryption. The negotiation of which protocols, algorithms, and keys to use is handled by the Internet Key Exchange, IKEY, protocol, versions 1 or 2. IKE dynamically establishes security associations, SAs, between the communicating peers. An SA is a one-way simplex agreement defining the security parameters for a specific connection. Example, which encryption algorithm, which hash algorithm, the keys. For a typical two-way full duplex conversation, you actually need two SAs, one for traffic flowing in each direction.
This sounds like a lot of layers and protocols all working together, wrapping data inside other data. That brings us to the implications of multi-layer protocols. What are the main benefits of this layering, but also the potential disadvantages or security risks that can arise from this complexity?
The benefits are significant, absolutely. Encapsulation is a core concept. Think of your HTTP web request being encapsulated within a TCP segment, which is encapsulated within an IP packet, which is then encapsulated in an Ethernet frame. This layering allows for modularity and flexibility. It enables flexible encryption options at various layers. You can encrypt at the application layer, like with TLS for HTTPS, or at the network layer with IPsec, or even at the data link layer, like with WPA23 for Wi-Fi. It also provides resilience in complex networks, allowing different underlying technologies like Ethernet, Wi-Fi, fiber to interoperate seamlessly by carrying the common IP packets.
But all this layering and wrapping must have some downsides or hidden risks, right? It can't all be good news.
You're right, they do. While encapsulation is powerful, it can also lead to potential covert channels where hidden or unauthorized communication might occur by manipulating headers or data within the encapsulated layers in ways that standard monitoring might miss. Encapsulation can sometimes be used to bypass security filters. For example, if a firewall or IDS is configured only to inspect the outermost layer, malicious traffic encapsulated within an allowed protocol, like tunneling over DNS or HTTP, might slip through undetected. And logical network segments, despite being designed for isolation, like VLANs, can sometimes be traversed by sophisticated attackers exploiting subtle protocol interactions, misconfigurations like VLAN hopping attacks, or vulnerabilities in the devices managing the encapsulation. The complexity itself can hide subtle vulnerabilities or make misconfigurations more likely.
Interesting. So security pros need to understand not just how these layers work independently, but also how they interact and how those interactions can potentially be abused.
Yeah.
Now, on to converged protocols. What does this term mean, and why are they important for modern network design? It sounds like bringing different things together.
That's exactly it. Converged protocols refer to the merging of specialty or proprietary communication protocols with standard ones, primarily protocols from the TCP/IP suite like IP and Ethernet. The main idea is to leverage the existing ubiquitous standard network infrastructure, your IP Ethernet network, to carry traffic that previously required dedicated, specialized, and often expensive separate networks. This eliminates the need for multiple parallel network deployments, simplifies management, and usually reduces costs. It's about maximizing the utility and efficiency of your existing IP network.
So instead of running a separate physical network just for your phones, you put it all on the main data network using IP.
Exactly. Voice over Internet Protocol, VoIP, is the classic example. It encapsulates voice conversations and often video into IP packets, sending them over standard IP networks just like any other data. This saves huge costs on separate PBX systems and dedicated phone wiring. To secure VoIP, protocols like CIDS, SIP Secure, and SRTKey Secure Real-Time Transport Protocol are used to encrypt the signaling and media streams. Other common examples include ISCSI, Internet Small Computer Systems Interface, which is an IP-based network storage standard operating at Layer 3. It allows servers to access block-level storage devices over a standard IP network as if they were locally attached SCSI drives, democratizing access to centralized storage without needing a dedicated fiber channel network.
And what about those dedicated storage technologies like Fiber Channel, which traditionally live on their own high-speed network, SAN? Can they converge too?
Yes, they can. You can have fiber channel over Ethernet, FCOE, which encapsulates fiber channel frames traditionally used for storage area networks, SANs directly within standard Ethernet frames at Layer 2. This allows SAN traffic to run over the same high-speed Ethernet infrastructure used for regular data traffic, potentially simplifying cabling and switch infrastructure. Similarly, InfiniBand over Ethernet provides remote direct memory access, RDMA capabilities, often used in high-performance computing, HPC clusters, over standard Ethernet. And multi-protocol label switching, MPLS, is a widely used WAN protocol operating conceptually between layers 2 and 3. Service providers use it to create efficient, high-performance paths, label switch paths or LSPs, across their core networks using short labels instead of full IP routing lookups at every hop. It's often used to deliver services like business VPNs or carrier Ethernet over a converged IP-MPLS backbone. All these technologies leverage existing IP Ethernet infrastructure for different specialized services, simplifying the overall infrastructure and reducing costs, but also introducing new security considerations as more critical and diverse types of traffic share the same physical pipes.
Next up, transport architecture. This sounds like it covers everything from how devices are physically connected to how data actually moves and is managed, to the underlying skeleton and nervous system of the network, maybe.
That's a good way to put it. Topology defines how devices are interconnected, whether that's the physical cabling layout, physical topology, or the logical flow of data between devices, logical topology. Then we have the distinct network planes that govern network operations, especially important in more advanced networking like SDN. The data plane, sometimes called the forwarding plane, is the doer. It's responsible for actually forwarding the packets based on instructions, the high-speed movement of bits according to the rules. The control plane is the intelligence, or the brain. It's responsible for determining the paths packets should take, managing routing tables, making forwarding decisions, and communicating this information to the data plane. And the management plane is used for managing and monitoring the overall network operations and configuration. This is how administrators interact with the devices to configure them, check status, and troubleshoot issues, often using protocols like SSH or SNMP.
And how do switches physically move packets? Are there different switching methods that affect performance or reliability? You mentioned store and forward earlier.
Yes, there are a few main methods. In cut-through switching, the switch starts forwarding the packet as soon as it reads the destination MS address in the frame header without waiting for the entire frame to be received. This offers very low latency and is very fast, but the downside is it doesn't allow the switch to perform error checking, like a CRC check, on the full frame, so it might end up forwarding corrupt or runt frames. In contrast, store and forward switching, as the name implies, requires the switch to receive the entire frame and store it temporarily in a buffer. It then checks the frame for errors, like CRC errors, before looking up the destination MA's address and forwarding it out the appropriate port. This ensures error-free transmission because bad frames are dropped, but it introduces slightly higher latency because the switch has to wait for the whole frame to arrive before making a forwarding decision. Most modern switches use store and forward or adaptive methods that switch between the two.
When we talk about networks, performance is always a key factor. What are the critical performance metrics we should understand, and why do they matter for security, not just speed?
Right, several key metrics define network performance. First, bandwidth is the theoretical maximum data transmission rate over a network connection, often measured in bits per second, BPS, like MBPs or EBPs. It's the pipe's maximum capacity. Then there's throughput, which is the actual successful data transfer rate achieved over that connection, taking into account things like overhead, latency, and errors. You want throughput to be as close as possible to the bandwidth, but it's always realistically less. From a security perspective, a sudden, unexplained drop in throughput might signal a denial of service attack consuming resources, or perhaps data exfiltration saturating the link. Signal-to-noise ratio, SNR, measures the strength of the desired communication signal relative to the level of background noise. A higher SNR generally means clearer signals, better data rates, and fewer transmission errors, especially important for wireless. Latency is the time it takes for a signal or packet to travel from the source to the destination and potentially back again, often measured as round-trip time, RTT, in milliseconds. High latency can indicate network congestion, long physical distances, or inefficient routing. And finally, jitter is the variation or inconsistency in the delay of received packets over time. High jitters can be particularly disruptive for real-time applications like voice or video calls, leading to choppy audio, dropped calls, or pixelated video as packets don't arrive at a steady, predictable rate.
Okay, it's all about making sure data gets where it needs to go, reliably and quickly. And how does data flow within and out of a modern data center? We have these concepts of traffic flows, specifically north-south and east-west, which seem crucial for network design and security placement.
Yes, these traffic flow patterns are absolutely crucial for designing efficient network topologies and, very importantly, for placing security controls effectively within a data center or cloud environment. North-south traffic refers to data flows that go in and out of the data center. Think of it as traffic moving north out to the internet or external users' networks and south back into the data center towards the servers and applications. This is the traditional traffic that crosses the network perimeter firewall.
And east-west traffic.
Yep.
That sounds like internal movement, side to side.
Exactly. East-west traffic describes data flows that occur within the data center itself, or potentially between interconnected data centers. It's the lateral communication between servers, storage systems, and different application tiers. Maybe a web server talking to an application server, which then talks to a database server. Understanding these patterns helps optimize network designs because, surprisingly, the vast majority of traffic within modern data centers is actually east-west traffic, not north-south. This realization also heavily informs security strategies, driving the need for internal segmentation and controls, like microsegmentation, to inspect and control this lateral movement and prevent attackers who breach one server from easily moving across the entire data center. You can't just rely on the perimeter firewall anymore.
Speaking of segmentation, let's elaborate on physical segmentation. What are the methods here for physically separating networks and management, and what's the ultimate form of isolation?
Okay, so physical separation. In-band management means managing network devices like routers, switches, firewalls through the same network interfaces and pathways that are used for regular user or application data traffic. This is generally considered less secure because if the production network is compromised, the management interfaces could also be exposed. Out-of-band OOB management uses a dedicated, completely separate network infrastructure, separate switches, separate cabling, separate IP address space, just for accessing the management interfaces of network devices. This physically isolates management traffic and credentials from the main data flow, making it much harder for an attacker on the production network to compromise the management plane. The most extreme form of physical segmentation, offering unparalleled security through isolation, is an air-gapped network. This means a system or network is completely isolated, both physically and logically, from all other networks, including the internet. There are literally no wired or wireless connections between the air-gapped system and any other network. Data transfer usually requires manual methods like USB drives, which introduces its own risks. This provides the highest level of security and is typically used for highly sensitive systems like critical industrial control systems, ICS, classified government networks, or secured development environments where the consequences of a breach are catastrophic.
So those are physical barriers. What about logical segmentation, which uses software and configuration to divide networks, often on the same physical hardware?
Logical segmentation uses software configurations on network devices like switches and routers to divide a network into smaller, isolated broadcast domains or routing instances. It's often more flexible, scalable, and cost-effective than physical segmentation. Virtual local area networks, VLANs, are a prime example, operating at layer 2. They allow a single physical switch to be partitioned into multiple separate logical broadcast domains. Devices in different VLANs cannot communicate directly. Traffic must pass through a layer 3 device, like a router or layer 3 switch, for inter-VLAN communication, where access control policies can be applied. This provides significant security benefits by isolating different user groups, for example, sales versus engineering, device types, for example, PCs versus IoT devices, or traffic types, example, data versus voice.
And virtual private networks, VPNs, we use them all the time for remote work, but what's their core mechanism for creating that secure, logical connection over an untrusted network?
VPNs create a secure private network connection over a public infrastructure, most commonly the internet. They achieve this by using encrypted tunneling protocols like IPsec, OpenVPN, or TLSSL-based VPNs. Data packets destined for the private network are encrypted, wrapped inside another packet with public IP headers sent across the internet, and then decrypted at the other end by the VPN gateway or client. This makes it seem as if the remote user or site is directly connected to the private corporate network, even though the traffic is traversing the public internet. With VPNs, you might configure a split tunnel, where only traffic destined for the corporate network goes through the secure VPN tunnel, while other internet-bound traffic, like web browsing, goes directly from the client to the internet. This can improve performance and save corporate bandwidth, but introduces a security risk as the direct internet traffic bypasses corporate security controls, and the client machine could become a bridge between the internet and the VPN. The generally more secure option, especially for corporate managed assets, is a full tunnel, where all network traffic generated by the client, corporate and internet bound, is forced over the VPN link to the corporate network. This ensures all traffic is secured by the VPN and subject to the organization's security policies and filtering at the corporate gateway, though it uses more bandwidth and can add latency.
Are there other forms of logical segmentation beyond VLANs and VPNs that give us even more flexibility, maybe at layer 3 or within devices?
Yes, definitely. Virtual routing and forwarding, VRF, is a technology often found on routers that allows multiple independent routing table instances to exist and operate simultaneously within a single physical router. It's essentially like having multiple virtual routers on one box. This provides layer 3 segmentation, allowing different customers or departments to have completely separate routing domains on shared infrastructure, preventing routes from leaking between them. It's sometimes described as the layer 3 equivalent of VLANs. And a virtual domain, often vendor-specific terminology like VDOMs on Fortinet or context on Cisco ASA, allows you to partition a single physical security device, like a firewall, into multiple independent virtual firewall instances. Each virtual domain acts as a completely separate firewall with its own security policies, interfaces, routing tables, and administration. This provides powerful logical separation and resource consolidation, effectively letting one physical box act as many independent security devices.
That's a great segue into microsegmentation and zero trust. This sounds like taking logical segmentation to the absolute extreme, down to individual workloads or applications.
It is, precisely. Microsegmentation takes the concept of network segmentation much further, dividing internal networks into very small, highly localized security zones, sometimes even down to the level of an individual virtual machine, container, or application peer. Each microsegment has its own granular security policies defining exactly what it's allowed to communicate with, often based on application identity rather than just IP addresses. The primary goal is to significantly minimize the lateral movement of attackers if they manage to breach one small segment. If one VM is compromised, it can't easily reach other VMs unless explicitly allowed by policy. This is often achieved using network overlays encapsulation technologies, creating virtual networks on top of the physical infrastructure, commonly managed by software-defined networking SDN controllers, or using protocols like VXLAN.
So instead of one big perimeter firewall and maybe some internal firewalls between large segments, you're distributing the security policy enforcement throughout the entire network, even to individual applications.
Exactly. This involves distributed firewalls, routers, and potentially IDSC capabilities, where security policies are enforced much closer to the workload itself, often at the hypervisor level for VMs or via sidecar proxies for containers, rather than relying solely on centralized physical choke points. This distributed enforcement model is absolutely fundamental to achieving a true zero-trust architecture. Zero trust, remember, is the philosophy. Never trust, always verify. It dictates that no user or device should be implicitly trusted based on its network location, inside versus outside. Every access request, regardless of origin, must be strongly authenticated, authorized based on least privilege principles, and continuously validated throughout the session. Microsegmentation is a key enabling technology for implementing zero trust, as it treats each tiny segment as its own untrusted boundary, requiring verification for nearly every interaction, making unauthorized lateral movement incredibly difficult for an attacker. It's a fundamental shift from protecting a perimeter to protecting individual data and application workloads.
Fascinating. And definitely seems like the future direction. Now let's talk about edge networks. What are these? And why are they becoming increasingly important in our interconnected world, especially with IoT and mobile?
Edge networks refer to network infrastructure and computing resources that are deployed closer to the physical location where data is generated or consumed, at the edge of the centralized network or cloud, rather than in a central data center. Their primary purpose is to reduce latency, improve performance, and sometimes handle data processing locally, especially for applications that require real-time responses or involve large amounts of data, like IoT sensor networks, autonomous vehicles, or augmented reality. Content distribution networks, CDNs, are a well-known example of edge networking. They cache content, like website images or videos, on servers distributed globally so users can download it from a geographically closer server, leading to faster loading times and better user experience.
So less distance for the data to travel means better performance and potentially less reliance on the core network.
Exactly. When we talk about edge networks, we're also concerned with Ingress traffic data entering the edge network, typically from users accessing services or IoT devices, sending data and egress traffic data leaving the edge network, either back to users, to other edge locations, or back to a central cloud or data center for further processing or storage. A key concept related to interconnecting networks, including edge networks and ISPs, is peering. Peering is when two or more independent networks agree to directly interconnect their infrastructure to exchange traffic between their respective users, often bypassing third-party transit providers. This direct connection can improve performance, reduce latency, and often lower costs for the networks involved, is how large parts of the internet are stitched together.
Now, a big one for our daily lives. Wireless networks. What are the general challenges of securing them, especially compared to wired connections where you need physical access?
Yeah, the biggest fundamental challenge with wireless is that the transmission medium radio waves is inherently shared and easily intercepted. Unlike wired connections, where an attacker typically needs physical access to tap into the cable, with wireless, anyone within radio range with the right equipment can potentially listen in on the signals. This makes robust encryption to protect confidentiality and strong authentication to ensure only authorized devices can connect absolutely crucial. The air itself becomes your network medium, and you have much less physical control over who can access it.
Let's start with Bluetooth, a common short-range technology for peripherals. What are the specific risks we should be aware of with Bluetooth?
Bluetooth, standardized as IEEE 802.15, is primarily used for creating short-range wireless personal area networks, or WPANs, connecting things like headsets, keyboards, mice, and speakers to your phone or computer. While incredibly convenient, it's susceptible to various attacks. Bluebugging allows an attacker to gain unauthorized access and control over a device's functions, potentially making calls, sending texts, or accessing data. Bluejacking involves sending unsolicited messages, like contact cards or notes, to nearby discoverable devices. Bluesnarfing is the theft of data, like contacts, calendars, emails, from a Bluetooth-enabled device. And bluesniffing is essentially eavesdropping on Bluetooth communications, although this is harder with modern pairing and encryption. Basic mitigations include turning Bluetooth off when you're not actively using it, setting in devices to non-discoverable mode so they don't broadcast their presence, being careful about pairing requests, and keeping device firmware updated. Strong authentication during pairing is key.
And the ubiquitous Wi-Fi, I hate to say 802.1x, the backbone of wireless local area networks everywhere, from homes to airports to offices.
Wi-Fi is how we create wireless LANs, connecting devices to networks without cables. The 802.11 family of standards, like 802.11a, B, G, N, AC, X, and now B4 Wi-Fi 7, represents its evolution over time. Each standard typically offers increased speed, better efficiency, and sometimes operates on different frequency bands, like 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz, and now 6 gigahertz for Wi-Fi 6E and 7. Understanding these helps you choose the right hardware for performance and compatibility.
And the encryption protocols for Wi-Fi have a rather infamous history of issues, haven't they? From insecure beginnings to the more robust solutions we hopefully use today.
They certainly do. It's been quite an evolution. WEP, Wired Equivalent Privacy, was the original security protocol, but it was fundamentally flawed due to cryptographic weaknesses, particularly its short static initialization vectors, 5Es, and issues with the RC4 stream cipher implementation. WEP can be cracked in minutes with readily available tools and should never be used today. Seriously, never. TKIP, Temporal Key Integrity Protocol, was developed as a stopgap measure to improve WEP security for existing hardware through firmware updates. It was used in the first version of WPA, but TKIP itself was later found to have vulnerabilities and is now also considered insecure and deprecated. WPA, Wi-Fi Protected Access, was an interim standard introduced by the Wi-Fi Alliance to provide better security than WPEP while TKIP was being developed. It used TKIP by default, but was designed to support stronger methods later. The real breakthrough came with WPA2 based on the IE Header 2.11i standard. WPA2 replaced WEP and WPA and mandated the use of much stronger encryption using AES, Advanced Encryption Standard, with CCMP, Counter Mode Cipher Blockchaining Message Authentication Code Protocol. WPA2 has two main modes: using a pre-shared key, PSK, which is common for home use where everyone shares the same network password, and WPA2 Enterprise, using 802.1x EAP, which is much more secure for businesses, requiring each user to authenticate individually, typically using credentials checked against a central authentication server like Radius.
And the latest standard, WPA3. What improvements does it bring that make it significantly more secure than even WPA2?
WPA3 is the current standard, offering several key security enhancements over WPA2. WPA3 Enterprise mode offers an optional, even stronger 192-bit AES encryption mode aligned with CNSA requirements. WPA3 Personal, the replacement for WPA2 PSK, still uses 128-bit AES but introduces simultaneous authentication of equals, SAE, which replaces the vulnerable PSK handshake. SAE is based on the Dragonfly Key Exchange, a type of zero-knowledge proof, and makes offline dictionary attacks against the Wi-Fi password much, much harder, even if an attacker captures the handshake. It provides forward secrecy as well. WPA3 also mandates Protected Management Frame PMF to prevent eavesdropping and forging of management traffic, and offers enhanced security for open public networks through opportunistic wireless encryption, OWE, providing individualized encryption even without a password.
How does 802.1x EAP tie into this for enterprise-level Wi-Fi security? You mentioned it for WPA23 Enterprise.
Right. 802.1x is an IE standard for port-based network access control, PNAC. It provides an authentication mechanism for devices wishing to attach to a LAN or LOMLIN. It doesn't define the authentication method itself, but rather uses the EAP, Extensible Authentication Protocol framework, to carry authentication information between the supplicant, the client device, the authenticator, the switch or wireless access point, and the authentication server, typically a Radius server. 802.1xe is the core of WPA2 Enterprise and WPA3 Enterprise security. EP's flexibility allows for various authentication methods such as EAP-TLS, highly secure using mutual certificate-based authentication, EAP-TTLS, or PEEP. You should strongly avoid older, less secure EP methods like EAP-MD5, which only authenticates the client and is vulnerable, or EAP-MSNAP2, which has known weaknesses when used inside PEEP, or EP-FTTLS without proper configuration. PEEP, protected EAP, is commonly used. It encapsulates the inner EAP method, like EPMS.BV2, within an encrypted TLS tunnel between the client and the authentication server, protecting the user's credentials during the EAP exchange over the air.
We also hear about SSIDs and BSSIDs when setting up Wi-Fi. What are those identifiers?
The SSID, Service Set Identifier, is simply the human-readable name of the wireless network that's broadcast by the access point. It's the name you see when you scan for available Wi-Fi networks on your device. Hiding the SSID broadcast is often mentioned as a security measure, but it's very weak security by obscurity, easily bypassed. An ESID, Extended Service Set Identifier, is technically the name used when multiple access points are configured with the same SSID to form a single larger network, allowing clients to roam seamlessly between them. In practice, SSID and ESID are often used interchangeably. The BSSI, Basic Service Set Identifier, is the unique Layer 2 MSC address of an individual wireless access point's radio interface. It's used by devices to differentiate between access points, especially when multiple APs share the same SSID. It's a crucial identifier for network management, troubleshooting, and security monitoring.
And when setting up a corporate Wi-Fi network, a site survey is often recommended. Why is that important from both a performance and security perspective?
Absolutely. A wireless site survey is critical. It involves systematically walking through the physical area where Wi-Fi coverage is needed, using specialized tools to measure signal strength, identify noise sources, and interference from other Wi-Fi networks, microwave ovens, Bluetooth devices, etc., map out coverage areas including potential dead zones, and check signal quality, like SNR. From a performance perspective, it ensures you place access points optimally for good coverage and capacity. From a security perspective, it helps identify potential signal leakage outside the intended coverage area where attackers could potentially connect from, discover rogue access points, unauthorized APs plugged into your network, and ensure your legitimate APs are configured securely and using appropriate power levels. You should also be aware of Wi-Fi Protected Setup, WPS. It was designed to simplify connecting devices, often using an 8-digit PIN printed on the router, but the PIN method was found to be fundamentally flawed and highly vulnerable to brute force attacks, allowing attackers to recover the WPOP A2 PSK relatively easily. It's strongly recommended to disable WPS, especially the PIN method, on all your access points.
What about different types of Wi-Fi antennas and the various operational modes that define how devices connect? Can antennas affect security?
Yes, antennas matter. For antennas, omnidirectional antennas radiate signals roughly equally in all horizontal directions, like a donut shape, which is common for typical home or office Wi-Fi access points providing general coverage. Directional antennas, like Yagi or parabolic dish antennas, focus the radio signal in a specific narrow beam, allowing for much longer range point-to-point links, for example, connecting two buildings, but with very limited coverage area. Panel antennas are semi-directional, providing wider coverage than a Yagi, but more focused than an Omni, good for covering a specific sector or hallway. A cantenna is a famous type of DIY directional antenna made from a Pringles can or similar. Using directional antennas can enhance security by limiting signal spill outside the intended area and making eavesdropping harder from other directions. As for operational modes, ad hoc mode allows direct client-to-client connections without needing a central access point, peer-to-peer Wi-Fi. Infrastructure mode is the most common, where all wireless clients connect to the network via a central wireless access point, WAP, which then typically connects to the wired network infrastructure. Variations include standalone. Clients connect via WAP, but the WA itself isn't connected to a wired network, and wired extension, where a WA acts as a bridge to extend a wired network segment wirelessly.
What about other wireless technologies for IoT or more remote communication like Zigbee or satellite? How do they fit in?
Right. Beyond Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, we have others. Zigbee, based on IEEE 802.15.4, is commonly used for low-power, low-data rate wireless communication, particularly in IoT applications like smart home automation, smart lights, sensors, locks. It operates in mesh networks, has relatively short range, and uses AES encryption for security. For much wider area or remote communication, satellite technology uses radio waves to communicate between terrestrial ground stations, VSCs, and orbiting satellites. This provides connectivity in remote areas where traditional terrestrial infrastructure, like fiber or cellular, is unavailable.
And there are different satellite orbits, each with implications for performance and latency. LEO, MEO, GEO.
Yes, the orbit matters significantly. AEO, low Earth orbit satellites orbit relatively close to Earth, a few hundred to 2,000 kilometers. Because they're closer, they offer much lower latency, delay, and potentially higher speeds, but they move quickly across the sky, so you need a large constellation of them like SpaceX's Starlink or OneWeb for continuous coverage. MEO, medium Earth orbit satellites, are higher up, typically around 2,000 to 35,786 kilometers, used often for navigation systems like GPS. They offer wider coverage than LEO, but have higher latency. GEO, geostationary or geosynchronous Earth orbit, satellites orbit at a specific altitude, about 35,786 kilometers or 22,236 miles, directly above the equator, matching the Earth's rotation. This makes them appear stationary from the ground, providing continuous coverage over a large geographical area with a single satellite. They're commonly used for broadcasting and some data services, but their great distance results in significant latency, often 500 meters plus round-trip time, making them less suitable for interactive applications.
Then there are cellular networks, 4G and 5G being the current mainstays. How do they work, and what are their specific security implications, especially as they become faster, more integrated?
Cellular networks are the primary technology providing wireless voice and data connectivity for mobile devices, smartphones, tablets, mobile hotspots. They work by dividing geographical areas into cells, each served by a base station or cell site tower. As users move, their connection is handed off between cells. Communication between your device, the user equipment or UE, and the cell tower, eNode B and LT40, eNode and 5G, is generally encrypted over the air interface, using protocols defined by the standards, like 3GPP. However, the provider's core network behind the powers might have its own vulnerabilities, and traffic might be unencrypted further upstream. Older GSM 2G and CDMA 2G 3G protocols had well-known security weaknesses. For example, GSM was vulnerable to man-in-the-middle MITM attacks using rogue base stations, often called MSI catchers or stingrays, that could impersonate legitimate towers and intercept communications or track devices. SIM card cloning was also a concern. These protocols have largely been replaced or are being phased out in favor of 4G LTE and 5G.
What about the latest, 5G, which promises so much speed and connectivity for things like IoT? Does it improve security?
4G LTE provides significantly higher mobile data speeds, theoretically up to 100 Mbps mobile, 1 Gbps stationary with LTE advanced. 5G pushes this much further, using higher frequency bands, millimeter wave, in addition to lower bands, aiming for peak speeds potentially up to 10 Gbps or more with much lower latency. This enables new applications like immersive VRR, industrial automation, and massive IoT deployments. From a security perspective, 5G includes several enhancements over 4G. It offers enhanced subscriber identity protection, concealing the permanent subscriber identifier, IMSI, over the air, stronger integrity protection for user data, and mandatory mutual authentication between the device and the network. However, security challenges remain. The provider's core network security is still crucial. Potential for interception still exists. Rogue base station attacks are still theoretically possible, though perhaps harder. Plus, the increased reliance on cellular connectivity, especially for critical infrastructure or as a backup link into corporate networks via mobile devices or IoT gateways, creates another potential attack vector that needs careful management and security controls, making mobile device management, MDM, and IoT security critical.
That's a lot of wireless ground covered. Let's talk briefly about content distribution networks, CDN again. What's their security relevance beyond just delivering cat videos faster?
CDNs are collections of geographically distributed servers that cache copies of web content, images, videos, scripts, etc., closer to end users. Their primary goal is reducing latency and improving performance for website visitors globally. But from a security standpoint, they provide several key benefits. They inherently provide load balancing, distributing incoming traffic across many edge servers, which improves availability. Crucially, their distributed nature and massive capacity make them very effective at absorbing and mitigating large-scale distributed denial of service, DDoS attacks. By handling the attack traffic at the edge, closer to the sources, they can often prevent the malicious traffic from overwhelming the origin server, acting as a critical frontline defense for web applications and APIs. Many CDNs also offer additional security services like web application firewalls, WAFs, at the edge.
Now, a big one for cloud environments and modern network architecture. Software-defined networks, SDN. What's the core concept here, and how does it revolutionize network management and security? Sounds like taking the brain out of the hardware.
That's a good way to think about it. SDN fundamentally decouples the network control plane from the data plane. In a traditional network, each router and switch has its own integrated control plane that makes independent decisions about where to forward traffic based on routing protocols and local configurations. In SDN, the control plane, the intelligence that determines packet paths, manages routing tables, and makes forwarding policy decisions, is logically centralized in a software-based SDN controller. The physical network devices, switches and routers, become simpler data plane devices that primarily just execute the forwarding instructions received from the centralized controller, often via a standard protocol like OpenFlow. This allows for network behavior to be controlled and reconfigured programmatically and holistically from a central point, essentially creating multiple virtualized software-controlled networks on top of a single physical network infrastructure. It's a key enabler for network automation, agility, and cloud computing because it brings unprecedented flexibility to network provisioning, management, and policy enforcement.
So it offers huge flexibility for network administrators to change things quickly. How does that translate to security benefits?
Yeah, the benefits are significant. Network devices themselves can be simpler and potentially cheaper white box switches. From a security perspective, SDN allows for much faster and more consistent deployment of security policies across the entire network fabric. It enables dynamic policy enforcement based on context, user identity, application type, threat intelligence, rather than static IP addresses and ports. It's also a key enabler for microsegmentation at scale, allowing granular security policies to be applied between individual workloads much more easily than with traditional methods. A specific network virtualization protocol often used in SDN environments is VXLAN, Virtual Extensible LAN. VXLAN is an encapsulation protocol that allows Layer 2 Ethernet frames to be tunneled over an underlying Layer 3 IP network. It significantly extends the scalability of VLANs, supporting up to 16 million virtual network segments identified by a VXLAN network identifier or VNI compared to VLAN's 4096 limit. This is crucial for large multi-tenant cloud environments where huge numbers of isolated virtual networks are needed.
In SD-WAN, is that just SDN principles applied to the wide area network connecting different sites?
Precisely. SD-WAN, Software-Defined Wide Area Network, extends the core concepts of SDN centralized control, abstraction from hardware, automation to manage the WAN links, connecting geographically dispersed locations like branch offices, data centers, and cloud resources. It allows organizations to intelligently manage and optimize connectivity across multiple types of WAN links, like MPLS, broadband internet, LTE 5G, based on application performance requirements, cost, and link quality. It can dynamically choose the best path for specific application traffic, improving reliability and user experience while potentially reducing reliance on expensive private MPLS circuits. And building on that, software-defined visibility, SDV, takes the automation and intelligence further, aiming to provide deep automated monitoring and analysis of network traffic across these complex environments. The goal is often to analyze every relevant packet flow to gain intelligence-based insights for security, performance optimization, and proactive threat detection and mitigation.
Another cloud-related term we hear often is Virtual Private Cloud, VPC. How does a VPC provide a secure, isolated environment within a public cloud like AWS or Azure?
A VPC is essentially a logically isolated private section of a public cloud provider's infrastructure that you provision and control. It provides you with your own private network environment hosted within the public cloud. Within your VPC, you have complete control over the virtual network environment, including selecting your own private IP address ranges, creating subnets, configuring route tables between those subnets, and setting up network gateways like internet gateways or VPN gateways. It's like having your own dedicated, logically isolated data center network segment within the massive shared infrastructure of the public cloud. This allows you to securely host your cloud resources like VMs, databases, and configure network connectivity and security using security groups and network ACLs, much like you would in an on-premise data center, but with the scalability and flexibility benefits of the cloud.
Finally, within network architecture, we need to think about monitoring and management. What are the key practices here to ensure a network is not just secure, but also available, reliable, and performing well? This feels crucial, but maybe less glamorous.
Absolutely crucial, yes. This covers the ongoing tools, practices, and processes needed to ensure network availability, performance, and reliability, which directly impacts security posture too. Network observability is a key concept here. It's about gaining deep insights into the network's state and functionality, understanding not just if something is broken, but why and how it's behaving, often by collecting and correlating metrics, logs, and traces. Traffic flow analysis, traffic shaping, involves monitoring network traffic patterns and potentially controlling or prioritizing packet movement, example using quality of service, QoS, to optimize performance for critical applications, like VoIP or video conferencing, and ensure fair usage of bandwidth. Capacity management involves planning and provisioning network resources, bandwidth, switch ports, router capacity, to meet current and anticipated future demand, ensuring the network doesn't become a bottleneck. Although this is arguably less critical in highly elastic cloud environments where you can scale resources more dynamically, it's still vital for core infrastructure and WAN links. And fault detection and handling is about identifying device failures, link outages, performance degradation quickly and resolving them effectively. This can involve automated monitoring systems, generating alerts, automatic remediation scripts, manual troubleshooting by network engineers, and robust incident processes to handle significant outages or security incidents impacting the network. A secure network must also be a well-managed and resilient network.
That's a comprehensive look at network architecture principles and management, a truly foundational element. Now let's talk about the secure network components themselves, starting with the operation of hardware. What are the key devices and how do they contribute to the overall network function and security?
Okay, at the foundational hardware level, we have several key components. Modems, modulator-demodulator, convert digital signals from your computer or router into analog signals suitable for transmission over certain types of physical media, like phone lines for DSL or coaxial cable for cable internet, and vice versa. They typically operate at the boundary of Layer 1 and Layer 2. They're essential for connecting your network to the ISP's network. RETAs operate at Layer 3, network layer. Their primary function is to forward IP packets between different network segments based on destination IP addresses and routing tables. They are the core devices that connect different networks together and make decisions about the best path for traffic to travel across the internet or between internal subnets. Switches primarily operate at Layer 2, data link layer, although many modern switches have Layer 3 capabilities, Layer 3 switches. They interconnect multiple devices within a single local area network, LAN, segment. Wireless access points, WPs, provide wireless connectivity, and the wired Ethernet network. They handle the radio communication and often enforce wireless security protocols. And for critical network components like core routers, switches, firewalls, and important servers, having redundant power supplies is essential for high availability. This means having two or more independent power supplies within the device, ideally connected to different power circuits or UPS systems, to prevent a single power failure from causing downtime. It adds a crucial layer of physical resilience.
The physical wires and signals themselves, transmission media. What are the security considerations there beyond just performance? The type of cable affects security.
Absolutely. And interestingly, one of the most common causes of network failure is often simple cable failures, physical damage, bad connectors, or misconfigurations. Sometimes the simplest things are the biggest risks from an availability standpoint. For wired media, we have coaxial cable, which is older technology, often used for cable modems. Standards like 10-base-2, 10-base-5 require terminators. It's relatively susceptible to tapping if physical access is gained. Ethernet, twisted pair cable, is the most common type used in LANs today. UTP, unshielded twisted pair, with categories like Cat5, Cat6, Cat6A, Cat7, and Cat8 supporting increasing speeds and frequencies, is standard. STP, shielded twisted pair, has an additional layer of metallic shielding around the pairs or the entire cable bundle. This shielding significantly reduces electromagnetic interference, EMI, both radiating out from the cable and interfering with the signal from external sources. This makes STP inherently more resistant to passive eavesdropping using inductive taps compared to UTP, offering a security advantage in sensitive environments, though it's more expensive and harder to install. Fiber optic cable uses pulses of light transmitted through thin strands of glass or plastic. It offers very high speeds, long transmission distances, and is completely immune to electromagnetic interference, EMI, and radio frequency interference, RFI. This immunity to EMI makes it extremely secure against passive tapping methods that rely on detecting electrical signals, making it the preferred choice for high security or long-distance backbone connections. There's single-mode fiber, SMF, for very long distances using lasers, and multi-mode fiber, MMF, for shorter distances within buildings, often using LEDs. For wireless media, radio frequency, infrared, microwave, the primary security concern is, of course, the ease of interception since the signals travel through the air, making strong encryption like WPA3 absolutely mandatory.
Given all these components and connections, how do we control who or what gets onto the network in the first place, even if they manage to plug in a cable or connect to the Wi-Fi? That's where network access control NAC systems come in, right? Acting as a gatekeeper.
Exactly. NAC is a security approach that aims to unify endpoint security technology, like antivirus, host intrusion prevention, vulnerability assessment, user or system authentication, and network security policy enforcement. It's like a strict gatekeeper for your network. Its goals are to prevent or reduce zero-day attacks by ensuring devices meet security requirements before connecting, enforce security policies across all devices seeking access, and use identities, user and device, to perform access control, deciding who gets on the network and what they can access once they are on. It often involves automated detection of non-compliant devices and automated response actions, like quarantining the device or restricting its access.
How does NTSC decide whether to let a device on? Are there different philosophies or timing for when the checks happen?
Yes, there are two main philosophical approaches to timing. Pre-admission NAC checks the device's compliance before it's granted any significant access to the network resources. The device must meet predefined security requirements, for example, up-to-date patches, running antivirus, no detected malware, before network communication is allowed beyond basic authentication. Post-admission NAC, on the other hand, might grant initial access based on authentication, but then continuously monitors the user's or device's activity and security posture after connection. Access rights might be dynamically adjusted based on ongoing checks, behavior analysis, or detected threats.
And are there agents or software involved in this process? Does NAC require something installed on every machine?
It depends on the implementation. Agent-based NAC requires a software agent to be installed directly on each endpoint device that wants to connect to the network. This agent communicates with the NAC server to report the device's security posture. The agent can be dissolvable, meaning it's temporary, often downloaded and run via a web browser or similar mechanism just during the access attempt, performing checks and then removing itself. Or it can be permanent or persistent, meaning it's a continuously running background service installed on the endpoint that provides ongoing monitoring and posture assessment. Agentless NAC, on the other hand, does not require specific software to be installed on the endpoint. It typically works by leveraging existing network infrastructure like switches, routers, wireless controllers, and protocols like SNMP, SSH, WMI to profile devices, scan them for open ports or vulnerabilities, or integrate with authentication servers to gather information and make policy decisions. Agentless NAC is often preferred for environments with devices where installing agents isn't feasible or desirable, like IoT devices, guest access, or BYOD scenarios. Regardless of the method, both approaches perform a posture assessment, a process of evaluating the security, health, and compliance of a device against the organization's defined security policies before granting or maintaining network access.
So NSC ensures only healthy, authorized devices are on the network. But even then, each individual device needs to defend itself. Which brings us back to endpoint security, host-based. This really emphasizes the distributed nature of modern security, doesn't it? Can't just protect the network, you have to protect everything on it.
Absolutely. It reinforces the principle that comprehensive network security is impossible without securing the individual endpoints themselves. Every single device, every laptop, server, mobile phone, tablet, and even specialized IoT device must maintain its own local security posture. This includes implementing and maintaining host-based security controls like host-based firewalls to control traffic entering and leaving that specific device, malware scanners, antivirus anti-malware software, and potentially host-based IDSIPs to monitor for and block suspicious activity occurring directly on that system. In today's distributed client-server model, applications and data are spread across many systems. Therefore, security must be addressed holistically at all points. The client devices, the servers they access, the network links connecting them, and all the communication equipment in between, routers, switches, firewalls. A weak endpoint anywhere in this chain can become the entry point for a much larger compromise.
So what specific safeguards should organizations ensure are in place on individual client devices like employee laptops or workstations to strengthen that chain?
Organizations need to implement policies and technical controls that impose safeguards on client content and user activities. This means things like clear email security policies and filtering to prevent phishing and malware delivery, strict policies and technical controls for uploading and downloading files, enforcing robust access controls, including strong passwords and ideally multi-factor authentication, MFA, for logins, enabling file encryption like BitLocker or FileVault to protect data at rest if the device is lost or stolen, configuring screensavers with password protection for inactivity timeouts. Other important measures include using isolated processes or sandboxing where possible, ensuring reliable local backups of critical user data, potentially using protection domains or enforcing least privilege on the endpoint itself, conducting regular security awareness training for users, including endpoints and disaster recovery, DR planning, and deploying advanced endpoint detection and response, EDR, or managed detection and response, MDR solutions for proactive threat hunting, investigation, and rapid response capabilities directly on the endpoints.
Okay, now let's move into implement secure communication channels. starting with applications we use daily: voice, video, and collaboration, like VoIP, which is almost ubiquitous now for business communications.
Right. VoIP, Voice over Internet Protocol, has largely replaced traditional phone systems. It involves digitizing voice and video signals and sending them as data packets over standard IP networks. Key security considerations include using dedicated voice VLANs to segregate voice traffic from regular data traffic, which helps with both quality and security, implementing quality of service, QoS mechanisms on the network to prioritize latency-sensitive voice packets and ensure good call quality, and addressing the specific security challenges around VoIP protocols like SIP, potential eavesdropping, denial of service attacks targeting voice systems, and securing web-based voice apps. Using encrypted protocols like SIPS, Session Initiation Protocol Secure, for signaling, and SRTP, Secure Real-Time Transport Protocol, for encrypting the actual voice-video media payload is crucial for confidentiality and integrity.
With so many people working remotely now, remote access is more critical than ever, but also introduces significant risks. What are the common types of remote access and the pervasive security concerns organizations face with telecommuting?
Remote access is essential, but yes, it expands the attack surface significantly. There are several common types. Service-specific access lets users access just one particular service from outside, like webmail or a specific application portal. Remote control solutions allow a user to take full control of their desktop computer back at the office, seeing the screen and using the keyboard and mouse remotely, like RDP or VNC, often via a gateway. Remote node operation makes the remote user's machine act like a direct node on the corporate LAN, usually via a VPN connection, getting an internal IP address. Screen scraping is another term sometimes used for remote desktop-type services. The security concerns for telecommuting are numerous and significant. Data leakage is a huge risk, especially if employees use personal devices, BYOD, or unsecured home networks, potentially exposing corporate data. There's often inadequate data encryption, both for data in transit, if not using strong VPNs, and data at rest on potentially insecure personal devices. Unauthorized data sharing or accidental exposure from unmanaged endpoints is easier. Insecure home network environments lack the enterprise-grade security controls found in the office, and general endpoint security risks are heightened due to potentially unmanaged personal devices, inconsistent patching, and higher susceptibility to malware outside the corporate perimeter defenses.
What are the necessary mitigations for these concerns to enable secure remote work? How can organizations manage this risk?
Organizations absolutely must implement several layers of mitigation. Strong authentication, preferably MFA, for all remote access is non-negotiable. Utilizing secure VPNs like full-tunnel IPsec or SSLTLS VPNs is standard practice for establishing secure connections. Enforcing robust endpoint protection software, antivirus, EDR, host firewall, on all devices accessing corporate resources, whether corporate-owned or BOD, with appropriate controls, is critical. Regular security awareness training specifically addressing remote work risks is vital, and organizations need remote monitoring and incident response capabilities tailored to handle security events originating from remote endpoints. Solutions to facilitate secure remote access can include traditional WAPIs for local connectivity, but increasingly involve technologies like VDI, Virtual Desktop Infrastructure, and VMI, Virtual Mobile Interface. These host virtual desktops or mobile OS environments on central servers within the secure data center and only stream the screen image pixels to the remote device. The actual data and applications never leave the data center, significantly reducing data leakage risks. Jump boxes, also called jump servers or bastion hosts for internal access, provide secure, hardened, and monitored intermediary systems that users must connect through to access more sensitive internal network segments. RDS, Remote Desktop Service, is Microsoft's platform for providing remote desktop and application access. And various cloud-based desktop solutions, Desktop as a Service or DIAS, offer scalable virtual desktops hosted in the cloud. Critically, organizations need clear, enforceable policies that address remote connectivity methods allowed, required transmission protection, encryption standards, mandatory authentication requirements, endpoint security standards, acceptable use, data handling rules, and procedures for user assistance when security issues arise.
Okay, beyond voice and remote access, how do we secure general data communications across various network scales, like between offices or to very remote sites?
The absolute core principle remains consistent. Ensure encryption for data in transit between devices and locations, using robust protocols like TLS for application-level security or IPsec for network-level security, especially for site-to-site VPNs. Within corporate networks, effective segmentation into VLANs remains crucial to isolate different departments, security zones, or types of traffic, limiting the blast radius of any potential breach. For backhaul networks, which are the links connecting smaller edge networks or remote sites back to central hubs or the internet backbone, technologies like MPLS, often provided by carriers, or Metro Ethernet are commonly used. These often provide QoS features to guarantee bandwidth and performance for critical traffic, and security is typically implemented via encrypted tunnels, like IPsec VPNs, running over these links. For very remote locations lacking terrestrial connectivity, VSAT, very small aperture terminal systems, allow communication with geostationary satellites, providing essential connectivity, though often with latency limitations. And the newer constellations of LEO satellites, like Starlink, are changing the game by offering much reduced latency and higher speeds, making reliable, high-performance internet access feasible in previously underserved remote areas, which also needs appropriate security layering, like VPNs.
And what about connecting to other organizations? Third-party connectivity always seems to introduce unique risks and complexities as you're extending trust outside your direct control.
It absolutely does. Anytime your network connects directly to another entity's network, whether it's a business partner, a supplier, a cloud service provider, a managed service provider, or even just allowing vendor support access, you are essentially sharing threats and risks. Their security posture impacts yours and vice versa. This also includes your remote workers connecting from their home networks, who can be considered a form of third-party connection risk. Managing these connections securely is vital. Formal agreements are not just good practice, they are often a compliance requirement and crucial for setting expectations and defining responsibilities.
What kind of agreements are vital here for clarifying security expectations and responsibilities when connecting networks?
You'll typically encounter a few types. A Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, or Memorandum of Agreement, MOA, is often a less formal document expressing a mutual understanding or general agreement on the intent and broad terms of cooperation between parties. More critical from a technical security perspective is an Interconnection Security Agreement, ISA. An IS is a formal document that specifically details the security requirements, responsibilities, and technical specifications for establishing and maintaining a secure connection between two or more organizations' IT infrastructures. It should clearly define things like the purpose of the connection, the data being exchanged, the security controls required on both sides, for example, encryption standards, authentication methods, incident response procedures, auditing rights, and liability. Regardless of the agreement type, the principle of least privilege should always be strictly applied. Grant third parties only the minimum level of access necessary to perform their specific required functions and for the minimum time necessary. Combine this with robust monitoring of their connection activity for any anomalies or policy violations. Treat third-party connections with a high degree of scrutiny.
Moving on, let's discuss specific network authentication protocols used to verify users or devices trying to access network resources. How do we ensure that only authorized entities get access, and what's the evolution of these protocols from least to most secure?
There are several protocols used, often in the context of dial-up, VPN, or wireless access, each with different levels of security. Let's start with the oldest and least secure, Password Authentication Protocol, PAP. PP transmits the username and password over the network in clear text, unencrypted. This makes it extremely vulnerable to eavesdropping. If an attacker can sniff the network traffic, they can easily capture the credentials. PO is fundamentally insecure and should never, ever be used in any modern environment.
Okay, so PP is a definite historical footnote, a no-go. What's a better alternative that avoids sending credentials in the clear?
Challenge Handshake Authentication Protocol, CHP, is a significant improvement over PPP. It uses a challenge response mechanism to verify identity without sending the actual password over the network. Here's how it generally works. The authenticator server sends a random challenge string to the client. The client uses its password, which the server also knows or can derive, to encrypt or hash this challenge string using a pre-agreed algorithm, like MD5, though that's weak now, and sends the resulting response hash back to the server. The server performs the same calculation using the challenge and the client's known password hash. If the response hash from the client matches the server's calculated hash, authentication succeeds. The password itself is never transmitted, making FeeChap much more secure against eavesdropping and replay attacks than PPAP. Variations like MSChap, Microsoft's version, exist but also have known weaknesses.
And what about Extensible Authentication Protocol, EAP? You mentioned it earlier in the context of Wi-Fi and 802.1x. How does it fit into general network authentication?
Right. EAP is not a specific authentication method itself, but rather a flexible authentication framework defined in RFC 3748. It provides a standardized way to transport various authentication methods, called EAP methods, typically between a client, supplicant, and an authentication server like Radius, often passing through an authenticator like a switch or WAP. This flexibility makes EAP widely used in diverse network access scenarios, including wired 802.1x and wireless LANs, WPA to WPA3 enterprise, VPNs, and PPP connections. Some specific EAP methods exist, like EAP MD5, which is very basic, only provides client authentication, not server, uses MD5 hashing, and is generally considered weak and should be avoided. A much stronger method is EAP TLS, Transport Layer Security, which uses TLS to provide mutual authentication between the client and the server using digital certificates on both sides. It's considered one of the most secure EAP methods, but requires a public key infrastructure, PKI, to manage the certificates, which can be complex.
And PEEP, how does that improve EK security, especially for methods that might not be secure on their own?
PEEP, Protected EAP, is a very commonly used EAP method developed by Microsoft, Cisco, and RSA Security. It essentially creates a secure, encrypted TLS tunnel between the client, supplicant, and the authentication server first, before running another, potentially weaker EAP method inside that protected tunnel. For example, PEEP is often used to encapsulate EAP MSCHAPE-v2, which authenticates using username password credentials. By running EAP MSCHAPE-v2 inside the encrypted PEEP tunnel, the user's credentials are protected from eavesdropping over the wireless network. PEEP itself authenticates the server to the client using a server certificate, but typically only uses username password for client authentication within the tunnel. It's a popular choice for enterprise Wi-Fi because it provides strong protection for credentials without requiring client-side certificates like EAP TLS.
Then we have the main AAA protocols, Radius and TACSIC plus Mulstel, fundamental for managing network access control, especially for administrative access or large-scale user authentication.
Exactly. Radius, Remote Authentication Dial-in User Service, is a widely deployed networking protocol that provides centralized authentication, authorization, and accounting AAA management for users who connect and use a network service. It's commonly used by ISPs for dial-up and broadband authentication, by enterprises for VPN and wireless 802.1x authentication, and for authenticating administrative access to network devices. Radius generally only encrypts, or rather obfuscates, using MD5 hashing with a shared secret, the password field in the access request packet, leaving other information like the username and attributes potentially exposed. It primarily uses UDP. TakeX Plus, Terminal Access Controller Access Control System Plus, is another AAA protocol developed by Cisco, often seen as an alternative or successor to Radius, particularly for device administration scenarios, managing routers, switches, firewalls. A key advantage of TakeX Plus over Radius is that it encrypts the entire body of the packet, using a shared secret, providing better confidentiality for all AAA information, not just the password. It also separates the AAA functions, allowing authentication, authorization, and accounting to potentially be handled by different servers, offering more flexibility. TACAS S Plus uses TCP, which can be more reliable than Radius's UDP. Diameter is considered the successor protocol to Radius, designed to address Radius's limitations. It offers enhanced reliability using TCP or SCTP, better security features, native support for TLS and IPsec, mandatory EAP support, larger attribute space, and better support for roaming and mobile IP scenarios. It's more complex than Radius, but is increasingly used in modern telecom and service provider networks.
Okay, now let's pivot to something every security professional needs to understand deeply. Network attacks. What are the major phases an attacker typically goes through when targeting a network? Is there a common life cycle?
Yeah. While every attack is unique, security professionals often think about attacks following a general life cycle or methodology, often broken down into phases. A common model includes 4 major phases, moving from passive information gathering to active exploitation. First, reconnaissance. This is primarily a passive activity where attackers gather as much publicly available information as possible about the target organization and its network. This could involve searching websites, social media like LinkedIn for employee names and roles, news articles, job postings, public records, DNS records, using tools like Who's or Dig, and even physical observation like dumpster diving, though less common digitally. Crucially, because it's passive, not directly interacting with the target systems, this phase is usually undetectable by the target organization. They're just collecting intelligence, mapping the terrain.
So just intelligence gathering from afar. What's next when they start actively probing the target?
Next comes enumeration, sometimes called scanning or mapping. This is an active phase where the attacker starts interacting directly with the target's network to identify live systems, discover open ports, identify running services and their versions, map network topology, and find potential user accounts or shared resources. Tools used here include port scanners like Nmap, vulnerability scanners, network mappers, and tools to query services like SNMP or NetBIOS. This activity is detectable by the target organization as it involves sending packets to their systems, which can generate logs on firewalls, IDSP systems, and servers. It's like actively knocking on every door and window to see which ones are unlocked or what's behind them.
Then they figure out how to actually break in based on what they found.
That's the next phase, vulnerability analysis. Based on the information gathered during reconnaissance and enumeration, like knowing the target runs a specific version of web server software, the attacker now tries to identify specific exploitable weaknesses or vulnerabilities in those systems or services. They might use automated vulnerability scanners, search public vulnerability databases like CVE, or use manual techniques to probe for known or even unknown zero-day flaws. Once one or more promising vulnerabilities are identified, the final phase in this model is exploitation. This is where the attacker actively attempts to leverage those identified vulnerabilities to gain unauthorized access, escalate privileges, install malware, steal data, disrupt services, or achieve whatever their objective is. This might involve using pre-made exploit code or developing custom exploits.
Let's look at some common specific attack types that leverage network vulnerabilities. Eavesdropping sounds pretty straightforward just listening in.
It is, conceptually. Eavesdropping involves passively capturing and reading network traffic as it travels across the network medium. In older shared network topologies like bus networks using hubs, this was remarkably easy because all devices on the segment saw all the traffic. In modern switch networks, where switches normally only send traffic to the intended destination port, eavesdropping is harder but still possible. An attacker might need to employ other techniques like ARP poisoning, MAQs flooding, or compromising the switch itself to redirect or capture traffic meant for others. The fundamental defense against eavesdropping is encryption. If the traffic is strongly encrypted, e.g. using TLS, IPsec, SSH, WPA3, an attacker who intercepts it cannot read the actual data content.
What about SYN flooding? That sounds like a denial of service attack aiming to overwhelm systems by just starting conversations.
It is a classic network-level denial of service that exploits the TCP three-way handshake. The attacker sends a rapid succession of SYN synchronized packets to the target server, initiating the first step of the handshake, requesting a connection. The server responds with a SYN ACK packet and allocates resources, memory, state table entry, waiting for the final ACK from the client to complete the handshake. However, the attacker either never sends the final ACK or spoofs the source IP address so the SYN ACK goes somewhere else. By sending a huge flood of these initial SYN packets, the attacker quickly consumes the target server's resources allocated for half-open connections, preventing it from accepting near legitimate connections and ultimately causing a denial of service for genuine users.
And IP spoofing, faking your source address.
Yes. IP spoofing is when an attacker deliberately crafts IP packets with a forged or incorrect source IP address in the packet header. This can be done for several reasons. To hide the attacker's true identity, making them harder to trace back, though return traffic won't reach them unless they can also intercept it. To impersonate another legitimate system on the network, potentially bypassing IP-based access controls or firewall rules that trust specific source IPs, or as part of certain DOS attacks, like reflection amplification attacks, where responses are directed to a victim's spoofed IP. Proper network filtering, especially egress filtering, blocking packets leaving your network with source IPs that don't belong to your network, can help mitigate IP spoofing.
So denial of service DOS calls and distributed DOS are fundamentally about disrupting availability, taking systems or services offline.
Exactly. A DDoS attack is any attack whose primary goal is to negatively impact the availability of a targeted system, service, or network, preventing legitimate users from accessing it. This can be done by overwhelming it with traffic, like a SYN flood or UDP flood, crashing its services by exploiting a vulnerability, or consuming critical resources like CPU, memory, or bandwidth. A DDoS, distributed denial of service attack, is the same concept, but the attack traffic originates from multiple compromised computer systems, often thousands or even millions of bots or zombies spread across the internet that are controlled as part of a botnet. By launching the attack from many diverse sources simultaneously, DDoS attacks can generate massive volumes of traffic that easily overwhelm even large targets and are much harder to mitigate than a single source DOS attack, as blocking one source does little good.
Man-in-the-middle MITM attacks are also a common and very dangerous concern, where an attacker somehow inserts themselves into an ongoing communication.
Yes. An MITM attack involves an attacker secretly positioning themselves logically between two communicating parties, for example, a user and a website, or two servers, who believe they are communicating directly with each other. This position allows the attacker to intercept, read, potentially modify, and relay the communications as they pass through, without either legitimate party realizing the interception is happening. It's incredibly dangerous because the attacker essentially controls the entire flow and content of the conversation, potentially stealing credentials, injecting malware, or manipulating transactions. Defenses include strong authentication, especially mutual authentication, and end-to-end encryption that the MITM attacker cannot break or bypass, like using properly validated TLS certificates.
And how is that MITM position often achieved on a local network? You mentioned ARP earlier.
On a local area network, LAN, a very common technique for establishing an MITM position is ARP poisoning, also called ARP spoofing. ARP is the protocol used to map IP addresses, layer 3, to MAC addresses, layer 2, within a local network segment. In an ARP poisoning attack, the attacker sends forged ARP messages onto the LAN. For example, the attacker might send an ARP reply falsely associating their own MIC address with the IP address of the default gateway router. If other hosts on the LAN accept this forged reply and update their ARP cache, all their traffic intended for the internet, destined for the gateway's IP, will now be sent to the attacker's MIC address at layer 2. The attacker can then examine or modify the traffic before forwarding it to the real gateway, or just drop it for a DOS. Similarly, they could poison the gateway's ARP cache to intercept traffic coming back. This effectively places the attacker in the middle of the communication path.
Okay, that covers some major network attack vectors. Let's talk briefly about how virtualization and SDN, which we discussed earlier, can actually be used to enhance security, not just introduce complexity or new attack surfaces.
Right. Virtualization offers powerful tools for security when used correctly. VLANs, virtual local area networks, as we discussed, provide layer 2 logical segmentation. By separating different groups of users or types of devices onto different VLANs using software configuration on switches, you limit the broadcast domain and prevent direct communication between segments without going through a layer 3 device, router firewall, where security policies can be enforced. This is much more flexible, scalable, and often more cost-effective than trying to achieve the same level of segmentation using purely physical separation with multiple switches and routers.
And software-defined networks, SDN, take this virtualization and centralized control even further, offering more dynamic security possibilities.
Absolutely. SDN allows for the creation and management of potentially thousands of virtualized software-controlled network overlays on top of a shared physical network infrastructure. By centralizing the network control plane in the SDN controller, organizations gain much greater visibility and control over traffic flows. This enables more agile and automated security policy enforcement. For example, security policies can be defined based on application context or user identity and automatically applied consistently across the network as workloads move or scale. SDN is a key enabler for implementing fine-grained microsegmentation and zero-trust principles at scale, allowing security to be integrated much more dynamically and programmatically into the network fabric itself, rather than being bolted on at static choke points.
Finally, let's quickly run through some common network tools and commands that every security pro, network admin, or even power user should probably have in their toolkit for basic troubleshooting, reconnaissance, and understanding network behavior.
Okay, a few essentials. First up, IPconfig on Windows, or IFconfig on Linux macOS. These commands display the current TCP/IP network configuration settings on the local endpoint device. They show you crucial information like the device's assigned IP address, subnet mask, default gateway router address, MSE address, and the IP addresses of the DHCP and DNS servers it's using. It's usually your first start for basic network connectivity troubleshooting on a host.
Then there's the trusty ping. Simple but incredibly useful, right?
Absolutely. Ping Packet Internet Groper is a simple but fundamental utility used to test the reachability of a host on an IP network. It sends ICMP, Internet Control Message Protocol, echo request packets to a target IP address or host name, and waits for ICMP echo reply packets back. It tells you if the target system is online and responding, and measures the round-trip time, latency, and packet loss. It's essential for basic connectivity tests and quickly diagnosing if a device is reachable on the network, though some systems or firewalls block ICMP for security reasons.
And to see the actual path a packet takes across the network, the hops it makes.
Yeah. For that, you use Traceroute, or Traceroute on Windows. This utility maps the route that packets take to reach a specified destination host. It works by sending packets, often UDP or ICMP, with incrementally increasing time-to-live TTL values in the IP header. Each router along the path decrements the TTL. When it reaches 0, the router sends back an ICMP time-exceeded message. By recording the source IP of these messages, Traceroute can list the sequence of routers, hops, that packets traverse to reach the destination, along with the latency to each hop. It's very helpful for diagnosing network delays, identifying routing loops or bottlenecks, or understanding the path your data is taking across the internet.
For finding information about domain names and IP addresses out on the internet, we have Who's and Dig. What do?
Who is a query protocol used to look up information in public databases about the registered owners, registrants, of internet resources, primarily domain names and IP address blocks. You can use a Whois command or online tool to find out who owns a particular domain name, their contact information, though often privacy protected now, the domain registrar, registration expiration dates, and the authoritative name servers for that domain. It's crucial for incident response, investigating malicious domains, or general reconnaissance. Dig, Domain Information Grouper, is a powerful command line tool used specifically to query DNS domain name system servers. You can use Dig to retrieve various types of DNS records associated with the domain name, such as A records, IP addresses, NS records, authoritative name servers, MX records, mail exchange servers, TXT records, and more. It's a fundamental tool for troubleshooting DNS resolution issues, verifying DNS configurations, and understanding how domain names map to IP addresses and other resources.
Wow. We've covered a tremendous amount of ground today in communication and network security. It's clear that securing our interconnected world requires a really deep understanding of these foundational concepts, the protocols, the architectures, and the constant evolution of both threats and defenses.
It's definitely an expansive and critical domain, yeah. But the core insights, I think, remain constant. The strategic importance of defense in depth, acknowledging that no single defense is ever foolproof, you always need layers. The critical role of network segmentation and increasingly microsegmentation, really embracing that zero trust mindset where no internal component is implicitly trusted anymore. Understanding the nuts and bolts of IP addressing, V4 and V6, the power and the pitfalls of secure communication protocols like IPsec and TLS, and recognizing the common phases and types of network attacks we discussed. Mastering these principles really empowers you to design, build, and maintain more resilient and secure networks in today's incredibly complex digital landscape.
It's a vast field for sure, but knowing these principles empowers you to protect against the ever-evolving threats and truly grasp the security implications of every piece of the network puzzle. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to check out our CISSP playlist for more domains.